Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdah la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Welcome once again to another episode of Dawahwise live stream, bringing you special topics with eminent guests in panels where you can ask questions interactively as well. So just before we go to our second part of this show, I want to say assalamu alaikum to Ustadh Hashim. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we got second part of this topic about feminism. So really looking forward to that.
Alhamdulillah. We have actually quite a few eminent guests today, especially sisters, to hear their point of view, because last week we covered this topic in depth with Ustadh ZiaUlHaq, where you've heard a Muslim brother or a Muslim man explaining about feminism, and some of you may thought, like, where are the sisters? Where are the women's voice on these issues of feminism? You might be biased in your view. So today, in the second part, as promised, we have brought, and we will be bringing you, inshallah, very eminent, knowledgeable sisters and Aalima, especially those who are also qualified on the subject to talk about, to deal with this topic of feminism, especially in the light of the understanding from a woman's perspective. What is feminism? How does it affect the Muslim woman, the Muslimah? Is feminism all about man's ideals, or man things? Okay, this is an antagonistic position to, patriarchy. Or are we going to talk feminism as an idea, an ideology, which is supposed to be giving the rights and the status and the position of women equal to man? So various things we'll be discussing, inshallah. So I want to bring in the guests first before we go into what we will uncover part by part from what we haven't done last stream. So let's bring our guests first. So without any further ado, so we will continue on a stream with packed of information today for everyone's benefit.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you sisters doing?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. It's a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to have you here on our stream, especially when we are aiming to bring in contents and knowledge and experience on board which will benefit and empower eventually our Muslim brothers and sisters worldwide. And we have you here today to talk about the subject which is close to your heart and close to an old sister's heart, about feminism. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, go around to ask you to introduce yourself briefly before we go into this topic. Just briefly as you can. You don't have to go in as much details. What you do, what are your backgrounds, and what you're passionate about. And then we will talk to you about the very subject, inshallah, if you don't mind. So, Ustadhah Aminah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, jazakumullah khairan kathira for inviting us over here and opening the stage for such an important topic. So I have been living in US for the past 23 years. I teach at a college, and my focus in teaching is religions. So there is a University of North Texas here in Dallas, and I teach over there. I teach undergrad. And I personally have studied with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me the opportunity to study with many amazing scholars. Akram Nadwi is one of them. Sheikh Khalil Abdul Rashid is one of them. One of them is Dr. Ahmad Al-Haddad. He's one of them. So I've studied Islam with them, and the rest of the education I have taken from American academia, which has allowed me to understand the perspective from a very Western, mindset as well.
Alhamdulillah. I understand you're pursuing your PhD at the moment.
I'm pursuing your PhD. Yes, Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. Sister Mindful Muslimah, if you don't mind allowing quickly introducing yourself.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So my background is in education. I'm a licensed educator as well. I worked in the school systems in the US and Dubai for the past 20 years. I started off as a teacher, then I went to be like teacher trainer, then I would advise principals and superintendents all across, especially the United States. And then I went into working with a lot of nonprofits. One of them, Muslim and non-Muslim. One of them was, you don't say so proudly now, run by Bill Gates, but alhamdulillah, worked a lot of work with education and also dawah. So on the side, I studied under many scholars, and subhanallah, right now I'm actually studying under like Muhammad Salah and different other teachers from Medina. I take additional courses as well through Mishkat University. And I mostly do my work where I've shifted now from just doing basic education into doing this exactly, to helping women with these topics, because I found that there is such a void. So I'm so grateful that you are covering this today, Allah yakram, because women really need to hear this. And the way I do that, just really quickly to say, is I have a podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts and 9 platforms. I know the other sister here has a podcast as well. It's called Mindful Muslimah Speaks. I do free classes. I create free resources and tons of other things and mentorship programs to address these issues. Exactly.
Alhamdulillah. Nice to have you here with us. And I'm sure we'll be looking forward to learning from all of you, inshallah ta'ala. Ustadhah Fatima. Sister Fatima. Can you hear us?
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if you can hear me. I can't hear you. So
We can hear you now. Oh, is it? Okay, let me just remove you and put you back in. Sometimes this happens. Can you hear us now? No?
Probably
Still not. Let me just try that once again.
Can you hear us now at all?
Still not, Sister Barkatulla. I think best thing to do would be, is it okay if we just log out and log in again? That might help. I mean, if you just close your browser and then come back using the same, I don't think she can hear us. That's the problem, yeah. Let me just WhatsApp it to her.
Okay.
So in the meantime, Mansur, you can just ask the question.
So,
yeah, go
brothers
ahead.
and sisters who and our friends who are joining us now and watching, this is a program on feminism. This is part 2 of feminism, and we'll be going around asking our esteemed panelists on this very topic. So I'm going to start with Ustadhah Aminah. Would you mind describing what exactly is feminism? How do we understand feminism in simple words?
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, that is a very good question, because this is a very broad term and people tend to, maybe understand it in a very, narrow manner. So feminism is, you can say, a political expression of the concerns and interests of women all around the world. So it's basically a political thing that it's one of the 6 movements that have changed the dynamics of the Western society. So in a very, simple terms, I'm just going to say that it is a very broad term.
Sure. Okay.
So if you want to go further into that, then we can go, inshallah. Yes.
Yeah, of course. We can, go in more details later on.
Yes.
Now, Sister Mindful Muslimah, if I can ask you this question. If you see the many women are gravitating towards feminism, what's the reason for this? Why are women gravitating towards feminism?
Okay, so I'm going to come from the perspective of the work that I've done. So I'm sure there'll be many, the esteemed panelists, they'll cover all of the political and the, economic and all these other types of reasons. But I want to take a bit of a different angle, if that's all right, where I give a voice to the women who are actually speaking about. I would like to share with you what they actually tell me after doing this with them for years. And just because I know not everyone in your audience might know who I am, I just want to explain where I'm getting this information from, as in like what pool of women I'm drawing this information from. So initially, maybe about, as the brother said, I was doing education, and alhamdulillah, back maybe 6 years ago, I noticed that I had done dawah this whole time with all the women in the community. I was naqiba, I would go into the different masajid and stuff, but I would notice that it's okay and easy to kind of form relationships with women and talk to them about these topics. However, at one point I made hijrah to Dubai when I was living overseas, and we were going to Saudi, and then I came back to the US, and I noticed that during the Trump presidency, I'm not drawing a correlation, but I'm just saying around this time, when I came back again to talk to women about this particular topic, it was really hard. I didn't find the ease in dawah like I did before. And I want to share with you what I did was I noticed that I didn't see our women in certain circles of ilm and things like this. So I said I have to go to where they are on the internet. So initially I was doing the dawah in the US. So I'm coming from that position. But then when I went worldwide, and at this point, I think we've reached about 700,000 women in probably 137 countries. So I'm speaking about women right now who are worldwide. When I speak to them, there's about 3 things that I hear coming up over and over again that they're constantly telling me. And I just want to share those. One, the first one is fear. A lot of them say that they fear becoming like their mothers, what happened to their own mothers, or what happened to, they fear that they'll be held back if they marry a husband. This is the constant thing. And of course, we can know that this is coming from the agenda, but it is also, I would say, coming from the way that the Muslim family is structured, and a lot of what they've been told was Islam, cultural versus Islamic. Actually, it is. And the second one that I noticed for the women, in all honesty, is that they are having a complete lack of understanding at times, not all, at times, of the aqidah, of how Islam is actually structured, where women's place is within the realm of Islam. And from that lack of understanding, they then go to other people for that information. So when I ask them, well, where do you get your understanding of this from? They say, well, I talk to this, I follow this Instagrammer, and I follow this YouTuber, and you know how it is out there. The internet is vast, and so they're taking all this information from there. And so that aqidah is an issue. And then the third one that I'm finding, and just, it might seem unrelated, but because I've done this for so long, I would love our community to really take note of this, is that there is an issue with low self-esteem that is happening with our women. About 80% of the women that I speak to cite some issue with themselves, whether it's body image or whether it's just like lack of self-worth. And a lot of times, because we know there's 2 things against them, is one, the agenda again, but also honestly, after I delve deeper into their families, it is oftentimes very much related to the parenting styles of many of us. And so that really hit home with me. So as a mother, I am paying much more attention to creating self-worth and self-esteem with our children. We understand from the seerah and the Quran, all of that. So I would say that these are the 3 things that are coming up over and over. And the reason, I'll end with inciting the last one, is because they're coming from a place of weakness with the lack of self-worth and self-esteem, not by their, biological makeup as a female, but because of they're coming from a place of pain and feeling of less than worth. They are so much easier to be approached by the agenda. And that's why it's so easy for them to take to the feminist movement, because they're already coming from a place of disempowerment, and they're seeing this as a way to gain their identity back.
So it shows clearly that the lack of self-esteem is an important part out of all of this. They fear that they cannot relate to, they cannot even identify themselves who they're supposed to be. So if you don't have this confidence and this self-esteem of about your worth, of course you're going to move towards somewhere, gravitate towards where you think you might have this support and this help, where you will feel more at ease and more comfort. So we will come and talk about this a bit more, because we want to know how we can improve this self-esteem and give the Muslimah the confidence in the Islamic values and ideals, so that you don't have to go to other ideologies. Like feminism is an ideological movement, and this is what we will be discussing to understand that. So I want to return to Jazakallah khairan. I want to return to Ustadhah Fatima. Sorry for having these technical difficulties. Now, if you don't mind just introducing yourself very briefly, first of all, what you do.
Yes, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I think most people know of me through the Ilm Feed podcast. I'm one of the presenters of the Ilm Feed podcast. But my background is that I was born and brought up in London. I studied in Egypt. And then I also studied at 2 seminaries here in the UK, one with Sheikh Akram Nadwi and another called Ibrahim College, where from which I graduated in Islamic sciences and Aalima degrees, 2 Aalima degrees. And at the moment, I'm studying Islamic law at the University of London. So part of my studies is actually human rights and Islamic law. And I believe that in modern times, feminism is very much connected to the entire human rights project. So yeah, that's just a little introduction. We can maybe go into that a bit later.
MashaAllah. I just want to state that I really appreciate that you guys have taken the time off from your families, your children, to discuss this really important matter. And as Ustad Mansur mentioned earlier, we wanted the sisters themselves to represent this topic, which obviously is about women. So it would be fair, I think, to say that this is something that not only affects both the sisters, but also the brothers, because feminism is something that has taken hold of the community and the society, both in the West and in the East. So Jazakallah khairan for that.
Sure. So if I don't mind, if you don't mind, just want to ask Sister Ustadhah Fatima a question. Having understood feminism in very general, broad terms, what do you consider or see the dangers of feminism that it can cause in terms of harmful things that it can cause to our society, to the Muslimah, the Muslim mind, especially? What are some of the harmful things that you might think that feminism itself, the ideology, can cause?
Okay, so I think, first of all, I do want to say that I think a lot of Muslim women who are attracted to feminism, a lot of them do it with good intentions, like, for example, maybe they have seen certain things in their community, in their society, or they've had some bad experiences in their own lives. And so especially when they go to university, I think, because the feminist movement is very pervasive in universities, to the point where I feel like every single one of the humanities is affected by feminism, feminist theory, and also critical race theory. And in my university, which is SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, Marxism is very prominent as well, right? So you have these ideologies that have kind of like I would say, an intellectual position in academia. And through that, they articulate their ideology. So what are the harms of that ideology? I think one of the problems is that feminism is conflated with women's rights, right? So people who care about women, care about women's rights. We as Muslims care about women's rights. We care about, the rights of human beings. But what happens is people think, okay, if you care about women's rights, you have to adopt feminist narratives. But I think part of that is because they're the only narratives people have access to, or they're very powerfully articulated, right? And they're all around us. And so you see Muslims, unfortunately, adopting the language of feminism and some of the premises which are fallacious that underpin feminist ideology. An example of that is, for example, this idea of toxic masculinity, right? This idea of toxic masculinity, which, if you really unpick it, is pretty much masculinity as a whole, right? Like, masculinity as a whole is seen as a negative thing. Men, this whole idea of patriarchy as well, right? That the entirety of history, throughout the entirety of history, women have been oppressed by the evil patriarchy. And you won't be surprised to know that when we study human rights and Islamic law, for example, all of the prominent voices in this field are so-called Islamic feminists. And they all start with the premise that Islamic law was influenced and created almost, right, by men. All of the structures in Islamic law, the rulings, the interpretations, they have a male bias. The Quran has been read, through a male lens only, and this has affected Muslims, right? So, in other words, there is an intrinsic suspicion of men that can never sit comfortably with a Muslim. If you were to look through a feminist lens at Islam will never match up. It will never be what feminists want it to be, because I remember in one of my early classes, I was like, but all the prophets are men, like right from the beginning, right? You're going to come up against issues because feminists have a problem with men in and of themselves, so this idea that we could have prophets chosen by Allah who are men, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has charged men with being responsible for the protection of women, that Allah has made men the head of the family. None of that is ever going to sit comfortably with feminist ideology, because feminist ideology is intrinsically suspicious of men. So that's just the beginning. One of my friends, Naima Robert, she highlights that, another problem is any woman who wants to have a loving relationship with a man, right? She wants to marry a man, which I'm assuming all Muslim women want to, inshallah, is always going to have a problem if she sees the world through the lens of feminism. Because every time he expresses masculine energy, right, which might present itself in various ways, and we're not talking about abuse, we're not talking about, abusive relationships, we're talking about normal, masculine behavior, male behavior, she's going to interpret it as toxic masculinity, right? You can't have a loving relationship, especially not a Muslim marriage, easily or successfully if you're looking at the world through that lens and you're looking at men through that suspicious lens. So those are I've just scratched the surface. Those are just some of the harms. But I also want to say that when it comes to women's rights, just as for the problem of the economy, we don't say we are communists, we don't say we are capitalists, right? Although we might adopt some of the principles or some of the, the ways that capitalism or communism looks at the world might be in common with Islam, right? We don't say we're capitalists, we don't say we're communists. Similarly, for the problem of women's rights, we should not adopt this ideology, which has been formed by human beings, mostly academics, flawed human beings, wholesale. And so really that's the case that I usually make when it comes to feminism.
Jazakallah khairan. Very important points made there. So it seems like clearly there is this ideological differentiation. So you have Islam with its ideology, how it views women and men, what are the roles it actually assigns within the society and at home, and how the Western ideology of feminism, I mean, why I say Western, because, there is an element of Western influence there from the start too. So their ideals and their ideology seems to be geared in a different way. So if I were to ask now, Ustadhah Aminah, do you see having this perspective in mind, the ideological differences and difference of the world view, can feminism be Islamic? Can Islam have feminism within it? Or are we conflating the terms or asking about something which is totally in contradiction to the ideology of Islam?
No, thank you very much. This is a good question. So before I get into the answer of this question, I want to situate the issue a little bit, because my focus is religions, and I teach different religions at the university. So one thing that if we understand is that feminism has three waves. And if you look at the first wave of feminism and why it originated, you are compelled to see that the women in those times had no other way. Because if you look at the history of that, in the Christian world, women were treated, not equal. We do know that they did not have the right to vote. They were not able to enter the universities. They were not able to own the properties. And then, because the background of the West is, Christianity, we know that. And the way it was interpreted in those days, the Bible that was interpreted in those days, we see that there's a verse in Genesis, verse 3:16 in Genesis, where this is mentioned, that women will be given these severe birth pains because Eve is the one, she was considered as evil, who taught, Adam to do the sin that was forbidden. And then we see in the same verse over there that God is quoted in the Bible as saying that because Eve is the evil and she tempted Adam, of course, as a result of that, all the women now are going to be born, all the daughters of Hawa or the Eve are going to be born with the original sin, and their punishment of that will be that they will have childbirth pains, and a man, this is the verse from the Bible, that a man will be a ruler over them. So this was their perspective. And this perspective was applied to the West, because one issue that I've seen in teaching so many faiths is that when we say religion, and this is the mistake that Muslims make, men and women both, our experience of religion is not the same as a Western experience of religion. That's the issue. When we say religion in the West, we have to understand they are referring to the religion that they know. They don't know Islam. They don't know other faiths. So religion is not a broad term that can be applied to every faith. So our experience of Islam was never that. But yes, we have to agree that the people here, their experience of religion was oppression. And the women were not given equal rights. So they had no other way but to do this. So this was first wave feminism. And first wave feminism is justified because even in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala tells us, "E'dilu," be just. So what these women did in order to gain the political right to vote, which should be a right that should be given to them, they threw themselves in front of the cars. They would do suicide because they knew that the key to the other rights is going to be the political rights. So at this point, first wave for feminism we see, and the other rights that they demanded at that point were also, if I can take the list out over here, is that, Married Women's Property Act 1870, then suffrage, the right to vote, and Custody of Infants Act 1839. So you can see that these were the rights that are justified for these women, and because of their experience of religion was oppression, this is what they had to do, right? So this is the thing. First of all, we understand. But first wave feminism were not against femininity itself. Until that, it was good. It was great. They had no other choice. These women were not allowed to enter universities. It was said a woman can enter a university only one way, and that is to clean it. These are the kind of things that you see in the books. And it was instead of pursuing a career, you should pursue a husband. That was the kind of thing that was being told to the women in those times. When a married woman had no access to her property that she would have given to her by her parents, it was her husband who would become the owner of that. So we see that this was not justified, and these women had no other choice but to stand up and do this. So first wave feminism, I would say that, this is my stance on feminism, and I think, this is what I've understood, is that we agree with feminism in terms of practical side. The issues that it has raised, some of them, not all of them, are the right issues. But yes, we disagree with the solutions the feminism is presenting. Because as Muslims, as the followers of the Quran and the Sunnah, we do believe that the solutions feminism is presenting to solve these problems are going to create more problems, as the other two sisters have just elaborated on. Because yes, the solutions is something that we can't agree on because of the Quran and Sunnah that we follow. But the problems, many of them, glass ceiling, women are not paid the same. But when they go to college, women have to pay the same to get the same degree. But they don't but when they go to work, they're not paid the same. Secondly, even in America, I'm not familiar with what happens in England, but in America, there is no place for motherhood. If women wants a career, then there is no place for her to have, because motherhood is looked down upon, right? So these are the kinds of things that we see. But then the second wave feminism came, and this is around 1960s and 80s. Now, what happened during these times, world wars were happening. And now the society was telling the women to go and join the workforce because men were out there fighting. So this was a strong push that now you're changed to the saying, break this chain, come and work at the factories. But before that, women were never given a job at the factories. Now, when the world wars ended and the people and the men came back, then the women were told that, that now no more, but then now no more financial independence for you and you have to go back home. At this point, then they reverted and they says, no, we are here now, we're not leaving. So this is the point where the feminism started becoming a little iffy at that point. Because along with these kinds of things, the sexual rights came up and things like that, sexual promiscuity became like a norm kind of a thingy. So there are certain things over in second wave that we cannot agree as Muslim, but still, you see what was going on. First, they were pushed out of their homes to work in the factories. And later, when they found financial independence, they were pushed back. That now leave the jobs and leave it for the men. So now you see another thing. Then the third wave feminism came in, and and that is very multifaceted, and that's where we see a lot of issues that were not compatible with Islam at all. But again, third wave feminism highlighted the issues of glass ceiling, that why are women not paid the same? And this is a real issue, and this is one of the things, because just imagine a woman and a Western society, she has to work, she has to pay the same fee to go to college and university, she has to work and do all of that. But when she comes to work, then she's told that you're going to be paid less because you're a woman, or if they find out that she's about to become a mother, she doesn't find the job. So you see that we agree as Muslims with many of the issues that feminism has brought to the point. And again, this is not our experience. This is the experience of the people who followed, of the Christian world. So we Muslims have to understand that when we say religion is oppressive to women, this is not our history. This is not who we are. So we have to differentiate, because when I teach, faiths, different faiths in my class too, I tend to realize that people, they refer to all the faiths as the same. And that's the problem. Not all the faiths are same. And I'm very glad you guys are doing this kind of a podcast, that maybe it will help people understand Islam is different from the rest. It's not the same. It's not in the same category. So these are the things. But then again, we come to see that okay, so as Muslims, we agree that there is injustice. And anywhere there is injustice, Allah Ta'ala has asked us in the Quran, "I'dilu," be just. So I'm sure all my brothers, all my, my fellow Muslims and brothers, will understand that we have to be just. But the problem is the theoretical side of feminism, which says what a woman can, what a man can. That's the problem. That's a feminist critique. That is a problem, because, okay, we are here, we understand the problems, we understand the injustice that is done, but then we get stuck into this feminist critique, which is, if a man can, so can a woman. And that is the problem. And also I'll tell you that this thing about man being the superior was about a white man, because as the sister mentioned, critical race theory. So the bourgeoisies, you know, we're all familiar with what bourgeoisies are, right? When Enlightenment happened and Europe came out of the Dark Ages, as we see that after that, that was the time when the bourgeoisie class came up. These were white men, and they said white men are going to be hierarchical to all the races. And they said even on women. So white men, really, I mean white men, the white race men, is superior to the women and the rest of the people of the color. And we know that. And what Enlightenment brought was liberal humanism. All the values that we see now, feminism included, all of them, all the ideologies, we call this liberal humanism. That's the religion of the West now. What is liberal humanism? Liberal humanism is, like in Islam we say, and this is the question that the brother asked, can it be Islamic? Islam, the center of everything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We derive our worth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We derive our lives and how should we live? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Liberal humanism says the center of everything is human being and his capabilities, especially rationality. This is what liberal humanism says. So man is at the center of everything with his capabilities, and that is mostly mind, not spirit. So the Western culture at this point does not have too much stress on the spiritual side of a person. They are more about rationality. So this is the difference that we have. In Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the center of everything. Men and women derive their worth from Allah ta'ala and the grace and the equal grace from Him. West, it's liberal humanism. All that you see, you can lump it up into liberal humanism. Liberal humanism is man with his abilities is at the center of everything. American Constitution. When the forefathers were writing American Constitution, they said all men are equal, under God. These all men meant white male, not women included. So you can see this perspective, but many of the people now, they don't understand this history at all. They don't understand that, well, if you look at Islam, look how Islam came into the world. Women were being sold and bought. They were a property. Islam came and did what? So we have to compare the histories of the two faiths before we go on and understand anything else.
Jazakallah khair. I believe Sheikh Fatima wants to make a point on that.
Yes.
And then afterwards, I'll go to Sister Mindful, inshallah. Mindful Muslim.
Jazakallah khair. Yes, I think it was great of Ustadhah Aminah to highlight that today, modern day feminism, whichever wave we're living in, is basically a subset of the liberal project. Individualism. I mean, some people have called it actually gendered individualism, right? So when you study human rights, one of the things that you notice is that just as there are people, within the human rights regime and the human rights advocacy that are using the human rights project as a project to spread liberalism in the Muslim world, especially. I think feminism has been seen as like a useful tool to spread liberalism as well, especially in the Muslim world, right? Through women. And so we do have to be aware of that. Regarding the waves, I think it was great that Ustadhah highlighted those waves. One of the things I would add to the second wave feminism, actually even before that, another aspect of Western or Euro-American history that people don't talk about is that actually between the 15th to 17th centuries, they used to have so many witch hunts against women, that they actually called it a Holocaust against women. A lot of people don't know about this, but there have been books written about the witch hunts between the 15th to I think 18th centuries, where the church, you see this, they have this negative connection from religion, for religion and women, that is constant throughout their history. The church was literally responsible for killing thousands of women, tens of thousands of women being accused of witchcraft.
Exactly.
And it was very much gendered, you know, it was
Yes.
very much about women, because a woman could be accused just like that for being a witch, right? With being involved in witchcraft. And that was seen as a type of Satan worship or whatever. And so then they were put to death with very little evidence. So with that kind of anti-woman history, it's no surprise that, you know, eventually women fought back. But I would say about the second wave of feminism in particular, that I think it was more, you know, than we think it was, because it was very much linked with the sexual revolution, the idea of free love, promiscuity. You know, there are images of women protesting, right? And they were saying things like, we don't want marriage anymore. You know, marriage is a type of human sacrifice. Okay. They were saying the maternal instinct is a myth. Motherhood and breastfeeding is slavery. You know, these are the types of placards and these are the type of messaging that was being put forward. And as for the ideologues, people like Simone de Beauvoir, in her book, The Second Sex, she argued that women have always been denied their humanity throughout history, which is a myth, of course. And she also says that men have invented and shaped everything. I mean, can you imagine what a terrible way of looking at history that is? As though women have no part in the creation of civilization, right? I mean, it's like the ultimate devaluing of the complementary roles that men and women have played throughout history, right? Mm-hmm. And then she goes on to say, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Now, that's very important, because now begins this whole idea of gender being fluid, okay? Mm-hmm. And I know it's not a PC topic to talk about, but I believe that the gender confusion that we see happening in our midst today, right? Where a man who is physically a man in every single way can turn up and claim that he's a woman, right? He feels like he's a woman. That kind of confusion and the kinds of stuff that's going on, right? That even Western commentators are like, don't know what to do with anymore. That has its roots in feminism, because feminist ideologues were the ones who came up with this idea that gender is just a construct. There's nothing biological about male and female. It's just been constructed by society, right? Which is obviously not true, right? We know that, of course, there are some aspects of being a woman and being feminine that are encouraged by society, but not intrinsically, right? Not completely. And so I think we have to be careful, because I think the second wave of feminism also, like I said, it was anti-family, it was pro-abortion, it was all about sexual freedom, blurring of the lines between the genders, to the point that women abandoned breastfeeding, right? And now you go to the NHS when you're expecting a baby, and what happens? You see these billboards where they're literally trying to encourage women to feed their own children again, right? Breastfeed their children, because that became the norm, not breastfeeding. Seeing breastfeeding as a chore, seeing motherhood as a chore became the norm. So
yeah, mashallah.
I think we have to be really aware that there was a lot more going on. In fact, the CIA, and I'm not just making this up, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. I've done a lot of research into this. One of the heads of the women's liberation movement in America, I've forgotten her name. She used to be the editor of Ms. Magazine. She actually says in her biography that the CIA funded them, right? So for some reason, there was a political kind of movement as well to encourage women out into the world, anti-family, I would say anti-community. And I think also that the Me Too movement that we're seeing today is as a direct result of second wave feminism and the harms that it wrought onto society. Because what did second wave feminism, we're talking about between the 60s to the 80s, right? And this is the period of time when so many of the women who are coming forward, who were abused, who were harassed, and sometimes it was because they kind of went along with it, right? Or they felt pressured to go along with it. So many of them, it happened to them during that second wave of feminism. Why? Because the message that was out there was, you don't need men, you don't need your father, you don't need protection from men, you don't need marriage, you should just go and experiment, be promiscuous, it's liberating, it's all about your freedom, right? Pornography became, everywhere, it was everywhere. And even today we see that that hasn't stopped. So I think we mustn't be naive, There are ideological things that have now caused human beings to basically, adopt all sorts of strange things that, of course, Islam seeks to prevent. Because Islam says men and women are different, right? Men and women are distinct. Men and women are not competing with one another. We complement one another. That Allah even curses men who dress as women and women who dress as men. What does that mean? It means that there is a distinction, right? And that distinction is to be celebrated. It's not to be erased as it's being done, in Western societies at the moment. So I think all of those things, like recently, and you have to also understand that feminists don't agree on so many things, right? Like there are feminists who are against this whole trans movement, and they consider it to be men trying to invade women's spaces, right? And then there are feminists who are like, no, we should be treating these men who are saying that they're women as women, right? So even between them, and feminists are fighting, and they're not clear on what their principles are and what they believe. So we as Muslims should stand back and say, well, okay, let them fight it out. They're obviously human beings, flawed human beings who are just fighting out their ideas. Okay, let them. In the meantime, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us guidance. The reason why Muslim women suffer in some communities is usually due to culture. It's usually because Islam isn't being implemented. It's usually because people aren't living up to, the standards that the Prophet ﷺ put forward, especially in his final speech, in his farewell speech, when he said, take good care of women, because Allah will ask you about that on the Day of Judgment. There's no political leader in history who said that, right, to his congregation. You can't find anyone who said that. So we know that it's a cliche, Islam is the answer. The point is that Islam has within it, the Islamic framework has within it everything we need to protect each other's rights and to fulfill our duties. It's because we're not implementing that. It's because people abuse their rights and responsibilities. It's because people act out their cultures that the harm exists. It's not because of Islam. And so if we want women's rights to be restored, if we want justice to prevail for both men and women, if we want a balanced society, the way that Allah designed us, then we have to return to the Islamic principles.
Inshallah, yeah. Jazakallah khairan. Great points from both Sister Aminah and Sister Sheikh Fatima as well, mashallah. I think it's quite important to understand the history, how it impacted this moment, the feminism movement and other ideologies that crept in as well amongst the Muslim societies and as well, I think. So, Sister Mindful Muslimah, I want to ask you, do you know there are, just as Sheikh Fatima mentioned about the abuse of the rights of the Muslim women?
Just before we go, I think Brother Muhammad wanted to make a point.
Oh, is it okay? I think it's Sister Muslim wanted to ask a question, but I'll let Brother Muhammad, just to for the audience to know that people who are not familiar, Brother Muhammad, mashallah, is our new admin. So he's going to be in the background, going to be popping in and out, inshallah, making a point here and there. Really appreciate Sister Mindful Muslimah for being so patient, because I know it's her turn. She's been waiting patiently. So, Brother Muhammad, can you please make it brief, inshallah?
I will do. Assalamu alaikum. So I want to pick up on a couple of points here. So first one is, it is no coincidence that this freedom of choice that was given to women coincided with the Industrial Revolution and the post-war machinery that was designed to create the consumer society and forward really sort of this idea of individualism and capitalism. And it's clear, I mean, in the political literature, it is clear that they saw, as the men came back from the war that wanted their jobs back, the women said, no, you know, we have now achieved a status that we don't want to give up. And so it was recognized politically, and they said, this is great, 50% of the labor force wasn't working. How do we get them back in now? How do we keep them there now? And so you saw these ideas, very insidious ideas, being promulgated throughout society, of things like reproductive rights, okay? Very bizarre concepts, as if women had not given birth before, right? Then the idea of, well, you should decide, it's your body, what to do with it. As if we as human beings had not taken, you know, sort of agency over our own well-being before. But all of this was fundamentally around creating the capitalist engine. And I think it's important to understand these waves that were driven ran almost parallel to these industrialization waves that have happened as well. And technology today is a key sort of proponent of this. If you look at the biases that are built into AI, for instance, if you look at the biases that are built into many of the automated systems that we have, whether it's social media, etc., it just essentially promotes what the biases that are already built into this engine. So I didn't want to miss that point. Make sure that everybody sort of appreciated that and maybe comment on it from our esteemed panel. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Brother Raja, thanks for joining us. So I think you've got a tab open in there. We can hear echo.
If you close your YouTube, perhaps.
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, I think that's better. So, like I said, thanks for joining us. I know it's quite late in Pakistan. MashaAllah, I really appreciate you making the effort. So, Brother Raja, if you just hold on a second, I think I just want to make sure that Sister Mindful Muslimah gets a turn. She wants to make a point, and she's been waiting patiently. So, just bear with us for a minute. We'll introduce you and or yourself, introduce yourself, and then we can take it from there, inshallah. So, Sister Mindful Muslimah, please go ahead.
No, I can completely connect with what the two sisters were saying. And when I think about concepts that are really key in understanding as women, like for myself as a woman, one of the most beautiful things that I think I learned about was the difference between equality and equity.
Yeah.
There is an immense wisdom in that, and equality is everybody gets the same thing, as I think we've let each other know at this point. But equity is the one that most women are not familiar with. They think, because it's sold to them so well, that equality trumps equity, or they don't even know what equity is. And equity is, for those who are less familiar, is that everybody gets what they need. But the problem is that the feminist ideology likes to act like equity is oppressive. Yeah, and this is a beautiful picture that you'll find all over, and I think will perfectly, show what I'm saying. Like a picture shows 1,000 words, right? So equality is everybody has the same thing, and that doesn't serve everyone. And equity is everybody gets what they need. So I'll give you two practical examples in life why equity is actually brilliant and it's much better and it serves women better. But I'll give one particularly general example and then just one that is very specific to the care of women. The first one is, for example, in education. Like I'm an educator, for example. In New York State in particular, in many states in the United States, we fought long and hard as parents and as educators to make sure that children, that they got, differentiation in curriculum. Like, for example, if there was a child who had Down syndrome, like my sister has a child that has Down syndrome, that child will be afforded a para or an aid, and the curriculum would be differentiated based on their biological terms. And it was no child left behind. And I'm going to make sure that this child is getting catered to its needs. And in this particular instance, the state was pushing equity as being superior and equality. Like, imagine if this child, on the contrary, was given the same curriculum, like we didn't know that child had, this biological thing that was holding them back from achieving the same thing. It's not that the child is worth less. It's not that the child has any lower position in society. It's just that this is something that cannot be ignored. And therefore, we should cater to the child and meet their needs. And this is what we're taught is justice. Equity on their terms, when they say it, is justice. But when we say it in Islam, it's considered oppressive and injustice. And the last example I'll give is on a more personal note in terms of the care of women. Sister Aminah and Fatima, they both brilliantly touched on this, is that the care of your children and, your job as a woman is seen as something oppressive or less than. And so I'll give you the perfect example. I was divorced. I had children, and then I had to remarry. But in the time where I was divorced, and like this happens in American society, I can't speak for the UK in particular, but in American society with non-Muslims, we're told as women, we should be equal to men. And therefore, if I'm divorced, I should go and fend for myself. I have to work. I have to provide. I should shove my child in a daycare and basically let someone else raise them most of the time, because I have to, make sure that there's food on the table and pay the rent and so on and so forth. And therefore, I have to be like a man and, go out into the workforce and then also maybe depend on the child support that is supposed to come to me, that is often doesn't come to women at all in a broken system. And that's the story for many women. And work 1 and 2 and 3 jobs, where on the contrary, Islam says that women should be provided for, especially in such a sensitive case, not because they're less than, but because it just makes more sense, so that they're freed up to cultivate the child's psychological, emotional, and spiritual needs, and that the woman herself will have less burden. And so the whole family steps in and cares for the woman. And that is equity. And I mean, as a woman who's gone through both lifestyles, I can tell you I would choose equity every time, alhamdulillah, and that is from Islam.
MashaAllah, yes. Assalamu alaikum again, once again, Brother Raja ZiaUlHaq, who's joining us from Pakistan. Just want to perhaps introduce yourself briefly before we ask you a question or two, inshallah.
Okay, first of all, Jazakallah khair for having me on the show today. I've been actually part of the Dawah scene in Pakistan for about almost 10 plus years now. And alhamdulillah, we've been trying to educate the youth in particular, working with different schools, colleges, universities, and dealing with a lot of the social issues that people go through, and trying to give them solutions from the Quran and Sunnah so that they can find their way towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you might be surprised that, in a country such as Pakistan, where it's a majority Muslim country, still we are living in times where, as we actually find all over the world, secularism, liberalism, and all of these values have taken over. So we've basically kind of lost touch with our own heritage and our own deen, for that matter. And so alhamdulillah, we're trying to sort of get back and educate the youth once again. So myself, basically I did my bachelor's in computer science from the UK. And then I traveled to Australia, where I did my master's degree in also information technology and management. And I was working with different multinational companies in the meantime. And then there was a point in my life when I began to ask those big philosophical questions like, who am I? What's the purpose of life? Why am I even here? And alhamdulillah, I'm very pleased that I was guided towards Islam And so I then began to formally practice Islam, and then I was very fortunate to actually come back to Pakistan to find some very good teachers of tafsir, hadith, so on and so forth, and then learning from them, and then basically dedicating my life towards da'wah and calling others towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So alhamdulillah, it's been a journey of about over 10 years now, and we've basically made some very good impact in Pakistan so far, and now we're looking to, inshallah, open up internationally as well.
MashaAllah, yeah. You got a great channel. What's it called? Youth Club?
Youth Club, yeah.
Youth Club, yeah. You guys are doing a wonderful job, mashallah, in educating the youth and everyone else, actually. So with regards to this topic, I wanted to ask you the question, do you believe there is some sort of do you believe that feminism and women's rights are synonymous?
Right, that's a very good question, because oftentimes when you talk to women or men about feminism, they think that if you say that feminism has problems or there are holes in feminism, then they automatically assume that you're talking about women's rights, although the two are not synonymous at all. As a matter of fact, I've appeared in a number of TV channels as well, and I've had the opportunity to talk to some leading feminists from Pakistan, and also people who have recently organized, we have an Aurat March here every year on Women's Day, and that's gone through a lot of controversy, but just skipping that aside. So I've had this opportunity to talk to these people, and I've said that, look, whatever rights Islam has to offer to women, I don't think there can be anything else that can be demanded after that. So for example, I put some things on the table for them, and I said, look, if you want to go out there and if you want to ask for certain women's rights, then inshallah, we will be at the forefront to help you guys out and inshallah champion those rights. Like for example, Islam gives women the right to an education. It gives women the right to inheritance, a share in the inheritance. Islam says no to domestic violence, to any kind of abuse that's taking place. Likewise, women cannot be married without their consent. Similarly, there have been traditions where women are married to the Quran in the name of religion. We're completely against that. This is not an Islamic practice. Similarly, honor killings, or what is actually known in Pakistan as karokari, is something that, people kill women, for example, for the sake of honor. We are against that. We believe and support that women should be given the mahar when they get married, as opposed to the dowry that's normally the culture in India and Pakistan. Similarly, we say that the women should not be mistreated, and as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as a sister, they have their special place. As we all know, the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, whereby the mother has been given 3 times more of that love and affection and care and time from the man. And likewise, we find that the Prophet ﷺ, when he talked about wives and when he talked about good character, he said that the best amongst you are those who are best in character, and from those who are the best are those who are best to their families, or especially best to their wives. And likewise, we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ talking about women in terms of having women children, that if you have 3 daughters and if you raise them up properly, then you and I will be like this on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And so any Muslim who loves the Prophet ﷺ, as we have to, it's part of our iman, would love that opportunity. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with the companion who actually asked the question that, Ya Rasulullah, what if we have 2 daughters? And he says, him too. So this is for the woman, not for the male child. And so all of these things are there. And so likewise, we accept that, once a woman is living under her father and her mother, in that household, her father is supposed to provide everything for her, her fooding, her clothing, her education, all of that. The responsibility lies with the father. And once the woman gets married, all that responsibility transfers to her husband. Now he has to take care of all of that. So alhamdulillah, Islam gives women all of these things. And on top of that, they have the right to vote, they have the right to have their own finances, the right to work. All of these things are there. So when I put these things on the table and I say, look, Islam is already offering all of these things. What else do you want apart from this? So oftentimes we realize that what is required is something that is other than what Islam is offering. So for example, they might throw in the LGBT rights in there, or they might ask for certain other things which are not basically part of Islam. So my sincerest plea to the organizers of the Aurat March and to the feminist movement heads here in Pakistan has been that, if you really want to create impact, and if you're really, really going after women's rights, then I can give you access to the religious side of Pakistan, and this is a huge majority, by the way. We have so many masajid, we have so many imams who are preaching, there's Jummah khutbahs going on. So I can give you access to these people. I'm actually teaching at the International Islamic University of Islamabad. I teach Islamic worldview and civilizations. I teach professional ethics. So I can give you access to the scholars at the International Islamic University. And if you have this religious body with you on board, alhamdulillah, so much can be done. You know, a lot of the atrocities you talk about, a lot of the injustices you actually talk about, we can help you solve that problem, because the same men that you're going after, all of these men are attending Jummah khutbah anyway. So what better way or what better avenue to give them this dose every single week? But when I give them this offer, they back off, because they realize that some of the demands that actually a lot of the demands that they will ask for, and they are asking for, are demands that are basically very, very pro-LGBT, and you know, things that are never going to be acceptable from the Islamic domain. Meaning that, you know, women should have the right to abort their children, they should have the right to dress up any which way they like, they should have the right to have whatever sexual partners that they want. Obviously, nobody in their right mind who has an Islamic perspective is going to agree to these terms. So this is where the kind of dilemma comes in, whereby you have, on the one hand, you have actual women's rights, and then you have the feminist movement bringing in something other than what is actually known as women's rights.
Jazakallah khairan. I just want to bring this point about gender roles, because it's important to understand what is the understanding of gender role in Islam. So if I would turn to Ustadhah Aminah, I mean, clearly there's a difference between the understanding of gender roles in the Western, or you know, the liberal mindset compared to the Islamic perspective. If we see that Islam provides all of these, the brother Raja mentioned, Islam provides all this, you know, beautiful and just things to women, why is there a disconnect? Why do we see Muslim societies are considered to be oppressing women? Did our Muslim scholars not touch upon the roles and status of women in society? Isn't there a legacy of scholars in Islam who are women? I mean, what's going on? Why is that become an issue? I mean, why do we see the understanding from the Quran and Sunnah, as the brother and sisters illustrated earlier on, that Islam is giving you all this just and balanced understanding of the gender roles between man and women in society and at home, and yet we see in the society in a practical manifestation is a bit different. Why do you think this is so?
Well, yes, this is a very good question. So first of all, why is Muslim societies doing that? And this is what I believe, teaching in a very Western secular academia for the past 15 years, I have come to realize that our issues is not Islamophobia. Our issue is nothing. Our issue is the ignorance of Islam. I think the biggest tool, non-Muslims or people who want to harm Islam, the biggest tool is in their hands is the ignorance of the Muslims themselves. And I'm glad that Brother Raja is doing this work in Pakistan. He's educating people. And I think that's the basics, that we ourselves don't know what Islam is. And we tend to become, you know, very much entangled in culture. And culture is something that does not go with human nature. That's the problem, you know, how we say Islam is deen of fitrah. The fitrah of a human being is something that will never align with culture completely, because culture is oppressive in many ways. And I'm talking about all the cultures. I'm not talking about only Western culture. All cultures are like that. So this is one thing that I think is the issue, is not having the education. And I do think that, you know, one of my teachers, I was asking him this question once, that why are we ignorant? Why is it like that? So, and then, you know, and especially when you're talking about men, why don't men understand? And the women I teach, they always tell me, why don't you go and teach this to the men too? So one thing that I would say, men are ignorant because the women are ignorant. We should remember that Allah Ta'ala, you know, how many times you get entangled in this question, why women are not imams, why she's not leading the prayer, right? And lo and behold, in America, we have masajid where women are now becoming imams, you know, and that's the problem. But why don't we understand that, you know, standing in the front and leading a prayer is not a preference. Allah Ta'ala has told us the preference in the eyes of Allah is the one that who is more pious. So men and women have different roles, But this difference is not preferential. But now the issue is that the dominant culture of the world is the Western culture. And the problem with the Western culture is, and this is what I'm saying, this is my experience in teaching in academia for so many years, is that Western culture thinks that a more religion a social order has, the less that social order has a place for women. This is what they say. And they say, in Muslim cultures have the most religion entangled in it. This is why Muslim cultures in general are oppressive, because they think religion is oppressive in itself. And why do they say that? Because their experience of religion is it's man-made. It's made by men, really, males. And because their experience of religion is such, and I just showed you there are verses in the Bible, and we all know these things, that, they think anything, and the religion was, created by men to garner toward the interests of the men. This happened. The second problem, that is a really big problem, is the history of colonization. We should not forget that. Why we started thinking like that. So a general term that is used, just to give you a thing, we say that. This is an English term. We say, so-and-so is a housewife. If a woman does not have a career, she's not working outside the home, or she's not earning money, we tend to use the term housewife. If you go into the history of that, because I teach epistemology as well, housewife was the term coined by the French colonizers. Because housewife is what, right? Homemaker is the term. But this is kind of like a derogatory term. As a brother said, you're a housewife, you should come out and contribute to the capitalist society. And modernity makes us seem like men and women are what they do. The more I do in terms of, career and things like that, the better worth I have. But if I am raising children and contributing to the family, which I think is the biggest job, what Quran said, Jannah is under the feet of what the Prophet ﷺ said, Jannah is under the, can there be, if you think logically, can there be a bigger designation for women? And Allah Ta'ala gave it to the women. And also we see that this idea of Imam, I'm going to come back to that, women have been given the leadership of the next generation. She is the Imam of the coming generation. And what we did, a mistake, the second mistake that we did as a Muslim civilization, we did not educate our women. And that is the problem. We did not stress upon their education. Look at that. Many masajid in Muslim countries do not allow women to come in. So it's okay for women to be marching in the malls and all of that. And there's no fitna there, right? But when they come to the masjid, we say, women coming to the masjid is going to create fitna. This is a problem. They will come to the masjid to learn. They should have access to Islamic knowledge. If we are not going to teach the mothers, we are not expecting any change anytime soon, because mother is the Imam of the next generation. Her duty is much higher than an Imam who's leading the prayer at the masjid. So education of women. Third, colonization. If you read the history of colonization, you will see what I was talking about before. West did not see women as equal to men, and this is around 1800s. At the same time, Western colonizers are coming to the Muslim lands, and they're seeing women in roles of education. We know that Muslim women were educating since the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So they're seeing roles of Muslim women, and they're kind of like, what are these women doing in these roles? Believe it or not, if you go into the history of colonizations, you will see it was the French colonizers who threw women out of the masajid. And later on, because we developed a slave mentality, we kind of think that this is something Islam has taught. And we are...
I will come back to you, inshallah, to develop this thought about the colonization mindset. I'm quite mindful of the time that Sheikh Fatima has. I just want to take the opportunity to ask some questions before she will leave us.
Yes, sure.
So, Ustadhah Fatima, so we are talking about the language here in terms of what we should be using or not. Clearly, it's become quite, evident that we should be very mindful and clear about the languages that we use. Would you want to elaborate a bit more on this? I mean, the idea of, Islamic feminism and feminist, can we even use this language appropriately?
Yeah, I guess I think I've covered some of the points that I wanted to regarding that, and that is that, you know, language is very loaded, language is very powerful. So when we adopt certain terms, and unfortunately what I'm noticing at university is Muslim students will adopt certain terms and use certain ways of describing things without really thinking them through, you know, without thinking through what the implications of those terms are. So if you describe Islam, if you're going to rail against patriarchy, right, according to feminists, Islam is a patriarchy, right? So, you know, what are you railing against? Are you railing against the fact that, you know, Allah made the prophets men, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave men certain leadership roles and gave women other types of roles, even leadership roles, but other types, that, you know, our great scholars, of course there were female scholars as well, but many of the most prominent scholars were men, and feminists have a problem with that. So before we adopt words like patriarchy, misogyny, you know, toxic masculinity, and these kinds of terms, I think we need to be very careful that we're not becoming mouthpieces for any other ideology. Because at the end of the day, I think two things we have to bear in mind. One is, what's the purpose of our lives? As a Muslim, you just have to keep returning yourself to that question. What's the purpose of your life? The purpose of your life is to live it the way Allah wants, right? To worship Allah, to please Allah in such a way that when you leave this very, very short life, you will live the eternal life in happiness, in bliss, in Jannah. So if that's the purpose of our lives, we look and we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us with the blueprint for how to live that life. He created men and women. He knows what our nature is. And so the guidelines that he's given us, it's for our own good. It's going to bring out the best in us as women. It's going to bring out the best in men and create the best type of society and community, right? And so I think before we adopt any ideology and the language of any ideology, we have to ask ourselves, does the perfect religion, does the perfect way of life revealed by God, revealed by Allah, does it need another ideology to support it? Does it need another ideology to fix it? Of course it doesn't. So I think that's really what I want to highlight about language, you know, and the use of language.
Just if I may ask you a further question, because now we do see our Muslimah, our sisters, when they go to university or colleges, they're exposed to all these isms and beliefs and ideas, which challenges their belief values and you know the morals and everything that you have. And they find that quite shocking often, because now they're exposed to all these ideas quite freely, and they're forced upon them in a way like, how can you not be like this? How can you not be secular, liberal? Of course, they don't use this language, but they frame it in a way that this is how you should be as an educated person, and you are here in the place of institution of education. What advice would you give to our Muslim youth or our Muslimas practically to help them to solve this issue in terms of when they have this shock factor in the first place?
Yeah. Okay, great. I think that's a great question, because it's not just with regards to feminism. I mean, I've seen in university at the moment, Muslim students are scared to talk about anything. You know, they're afraid to kind of assert their own beliefs. They're just afraid. And I think it speaks to the lack of self-esteem, you know, the lack of tarbiyah that we're giving that generation. You know, I think one of the things about our generation is that we kind of had identity crises, and we had to sort of discover our own deen, right? And then I think we would study the fundamentals, and we were quite quite firm and knowledgeable about the fundamentals. So when we were exposed to these ideas, we could push back, right? Because we could smell a rat, right? But unfortunately, with this new generation, I don't think enough effort has been put into getting the fundamental principles, you know, in terms of the fundamental beliefs, what goes against the fundamental beliefs, and why, you know, why we believe what we believe. So all of those kind of important aspects, I don't think they have been conveyed well enough. And so I think in terms of students, the advice I would give is don't just go to university and let university be your only education. You need to go and study with scholars. You need to go and study with our ulama as well, parallel to your studies at university. You know, have some connection with our tradition and with knowledgeable Muslims, because, you know, the ideological onslaught at university is real. And if you're not equipped, if you don't get to hear the alternative narrative, the truth, then you're going to be very easily led, very easily kind of affected, as human beings are, right? Because we're social animals, we're social beings, we completely get affected by our peers and our surroundings. So that's one thing. You need to get an education. You need to make sure you have an Islamic education and a connection to our tradition from scholars who actually believe in the tradition, right? And the second thing is, university is there for you to make interventions. You know, the professors, they're always encouraging people to make interventions. That's actually one of the good things about Western academia, is that, you know, the professors are not considered to be so kind of, you know, beyond reproach. You are allowed to question things. You're allowed to, you know, question even the premise of a professor's argument. So have the courage to do that. And the more you do it, the more confidence you have. And if you can't do that, at the very least, don't become like sheep and just, you know, just copy and, you know, repeat what other people are saying. Use your critical thinking faculties, you know. And one more thing I would say is that I definitely think that in academia, the orthodox voices, the voices of Muslims who are not secularists and who are not liberals, so-called, are missing, you know, from a lot of the discourse, especially in Islamic studies and Islamic law and those kinds of areas, which now are being studied along with subjects like human rights, finance, etc. So I think it's really important for Muslims who have a good grounding in Islamic knowledge to enter those fields and to write, to produce literature, to provide the alternative voice. Because it was very frustrating being in classes where we were studying women's rights and Islamic law, where the only voices, the only books, the only literature that was there, you know, that was actually at a high level, was from so-called Islamic feminists who, as Brother Raja has highlighted, were basically asking for something that wasn't Islam, right? I think we need to provide those voices. And we need to be writing. We need to enter that space. And if we don't, then it's no surprise that then those voices are the ones that then filter down into society, right? And then become, affect the masses.
That shows the importance of this, you know, Muslim women to join and participate and raise their voices. Because if you are not vocal, if you don't raise and participate, then of course no one's going to hear what our positions are. So Jazakallah khairan once again. I just want to return to Ustadhah Aminah. Sorry for this interjection. We were talking about the effect of colonization that it had on the mindset and on our societies. Please carry on.
It's okay. So yes, so the reason that we are still ignorant is number one, that our ignorance of Islam is the biggest thing that goes against us. Second thing, the history of colonization and how that has affected the Muslim mind is to be taken into regard as well. Because if you see what happened over there, how the colonizers came and the history, and as Sister Fatima is saying over here, I truly think that people who are disconnected from their own history are going to have no grounding. So I think the first thing, yes, yes, we learn Aqidah and the pillars and all of that, but it is very important that Muslims learn their own history as well, what really happened. And the history of colonization is going to highlight this point, that how the colonizers have affected the mindset that Muslims have now. The issues in Pakistan, I'm from Pakistan myself, I was raised in the Middle East, and in both places, what I saw most prominent was a colonized mindset, a mindset that cannot think independently and by itself and only knows how to follow. That's a big problem. So, and if you see the history of colonization, how the colonizers came to the Muslim lands, how they saw the roles of the Muslim women, and they were very, they were not happy about that. And one thing, once I did a big research on the hijab and why this is a big issue in the Western media, and you will be surprised to find out that the books that you see, that when the colonizers came to the Muslim land and they saw Muslim women, that they were hiding from their gaze because they were wearing hijab and they were wearing niqab, they kind of took it as, we are the masters and these are the slaves. How come? And how dare these women who are from the slaves hide themselves from our gaze? And that's because one thing about liberal humanism is about, everything has to be put on the show, right? So when these colonizers, go dig into the history of this, came to the Muslim land and they saw Muslim women wearing niqab and hijab, they kind of got offended to that. And they said that, these are the slave women. How can they hide themselves from the gaze of the masters? So this is why from that point on, hijab became a big problem. Secondly, we do understand that colonizers, because they entered into the Muslim boundaries, they invaded our lands. We couldn't do nothing about that. But then the Muslims became more kind of, insecure about their intimate boundaries. And as a reaction to what was going on, they kind of, made their women go into, those places and, took them out from schools, no education, things like that. Because yes, we were the people who were insecure. And when people become insecure, they do these kinds of things. So you can see the history that after colonization happened, the Muslim women becoming scholars, the Muslim women, going into things like that, went completely down. And there was a point in, I think it was 1920s, when except 4 Muslim countries, the entire Muslim world was colonized. And just imagine Pakistan. Pakistan has been independent from colonizers for the past 70 years. That's a very small amount. The colonizer mindset is still there. So Muslims have to understand that what colonization have done to us and how should we decolonize those thinking. That is also very important. So these are my reasons that I think that we are still engaged in these kinds of things and we are not, learning what Islam has to, inshallah, say to us.
I want to ask a question to Brother Raja, the similar question that Ustad Mansur asked. Some network issues here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, clear.
Okay. So, Brother Raja, the question that I would like to ask is with regards to this identity crisis for our youth who actually go to universities and colleges. And I don't know if it's the same, the case is the same in Pakistan, where they have this sort of identity crisis when they're exposed to this ideologies and different isms, and when their worldview is kind of shaken, and they're forced to question themselves about these different ideologies and where they stand as people who come from a background of Muslim Islamic faith, and then they are forced to question themselves about these different isms and where they stand in front of their peers, in front of the teachers who talk about these different ideologies and try to promote it as well. I believe America spent millions of dollars trying to promote feminism in Pakistan, even though people in America are starving. So they would have no issues promoting this kind of ideologies in Pakistan, which is kind of deliberate from their side. And obviously, this is something that is prevalent, I believe, in the colleges and universities there, especially in the English-speaking side of the population there.
Yes, that's actually a very valid point. What's happened here is that obviously Pakistan right now, we have the RAND report that came out a few years ago. It came out in 2007. It actually talked about the different categorizations of Muslims. For example, they said that, you know, those are the, there's a small group of fundamentalists, those people who think that the Quran and the Sunnah and the sources of Islamic knowledge, they have to be adhered to. That's the fundamentalists for you. And then they mentioned that there's another group out there who are the traditionalists, those people who have some inclination towards Islam, but they're not fully practicing. For them, Islam is more of a cultural thing rather than a way of life. And then you have the modernists, those who are trying to reform Islam, change Islam, if you will, and trying to come up with these new concepts that will be far away from what was the classical understanding of the ulama. And then you have, at last, you have the secular or the liberal Muslims, those who pretty much want nothing to do with Islam. They just want that, okay, fine, label me as a Muslim from the point of view that I was born into a Muslim family. But for all practical purposes, I'm following a completely liberal philosophy in life. So these are the four categories that the RAND report primarily mentioned. Now, in this, I would say that a vast majority of the Pakistani population is actually traditionalists. There are people who have a love for Islam. There are people who will, basically go out into the streets and protest every time there is any issue of blasphemy or something like that. So there are people who have a lot of passion for Islam, but when you look at their lives and when you look at what kind of things they're up to, you find that there are a lot of un-Islamic practices taking place. So at least, at the very least, I'm happy that, alhamdulillah, there are people who at least have this love for Islam, even if their life is contrary to that. And this is what, we find is a kind of like a state of even nifaq maybe, where people are kind of living double lives and so on. But I think that, having said that, there is a population now which is increasingly moving more towards understanding Islam, especially now in the youth. Since the last, I would say, 7, 8, maybe 10 years or so, I'm seeing this rise in trend of the young population, the youth of Pakistan, slowly going back to their roots, wanting to learn the Quran and the Sunnah, asking questions, asking ulama why we do a certain thing, why this is halal in Islam, why this is haram in Islam. At least there's that interest, because a few years back, if you go like 20 years back, 30 years back, maybe the youth were completely disconnected from the religious discourse. All of that was happening only with the ulama. But now, alhamdulillah, it's actually gone further down, and now there are youth who are actively engaged. But at the same time, we have the modernists and we have the secular liberals also, who are very actively now trying to further their agenda through the influx of media, mainstream media, mass media, social media, print media. All of these things we're being bombarded by this content, as we see this happening all over the world as well. That, with Hollywood and Bollywood and XYZ, all of this stuff that's coming through, a lot of the concepts and the ideologies that are coming in are highly secular, liberal, and promoting that type of agenda. So there is this constant struggle, and I feel that in the next few years, perhaps this polarity is going to become more visible, and in the end, it'll be the traditionalists in the middle who will have to either go one way or the other way. Either they will stick to those people who are adhering to the Quran and Sunnah, or they will have to go and stick to those people, because this divide is now becoming very prominent. But inshallah Rahman, I have my firm belief that inshallah, this is part of our Aqeedah as well, that the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will prevail. And so we just have to do our part in terms of guiding people, and we leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khairan. Just want to return to Sister Mindful Muslimah. Now, we've discussed a lot of the issues surrounding the Muslimah or the Muslim woman in contemporary society. And we can see clearly there are problems that are identifiable quite easily, and there are problems which takes a bit of thinking to identify what the causes may be. So from your perspective, what do you think the solutions are of some of the problems that we touched upon in a practical setting?
Yeah, I would love to speak in a practical sense, because I feel like sometimes this whole conversation feels so big. And a lot of times as the Muslim community, we feel helpless. I've heard this conversation a lot of times between different Muslim organizations. What can we do? They have a bigger media, a bigger agenda, a bigger pocket than we do. And how can we fight this? And I want to say there's some really, really practical things that we are ignoring as a Muslim community, that if we did these from the inside out, we could easily switch the narrative. And I would just like to quickly highlight those. And by the way, this is literally the reason I came on. And not this program in particular, this is a great program, I'm talking about as in online, because I had no desire, actually. I like to do all the work that I do locally, but when I saw that there was no one kind of catering to this, so what I'm gonna say right now, I would like more Muslim organizations to consider this and to maybe help in this work, because this is really much of what I do. And so the first thing is, we need to take just three, it's like a phases that I go through, three basic phases. The first one is we need to listen to our women a bit more. I feel like you're doing an amazing job at giving this platform, right? So that we could say how we feel. But we also need to sometimes, as a Muslim community, because we're a bit biased, we need to not look at our women who decide to take off hijab and do this and do that and go on feminist marches as deviants. And I hear this type of a narrative, and this is incorrect. We have to look at them instead as, okay, these are our sisters. We want to hear what their arguments, hear what their pains are, and so that we can understand the points that they're coming from. And I think Brother Mansur, he does this very well. My husband, by the way, he loves your program. We watched this for years, and he says, oh, Mansur is so good at hearing it where someone's coming from, so he knows exactly where to speak to them in an argument. And I think that's what we're not doing with our women. We want to connect with them, find out what's happening to them. We're all concerned about our women, but are we really listening? So the first step is listening, and this is what I'm trying to do a lot more, and why I create what I create. The second one is to connect with and this is the harder one. I've worked with many Muslim organizations, and I've even helped to lead them, and I have yet to find one that does this in a very, very consecutive way, in a way where they're really trying to do relationship building. So the second phase is to connect and build real relationships with them and mentor and support them long term. I find these little things pop up here and there, but I would love for more Muslim organizations to do that, because in doing that, we gain the understanding and trust, and they feel heard, which leads into the third phase, which I think as da'is everybody is looking for, which is to educate and reform. And Sister Fatima, she spoke very well on the fact that there's certain things that this generation or the one prior or whatever wasn't given necessarily in terms of the aqidah. And if this understanding was there, if they were afforded this information, quite possibly they wouldn't, fall prey to all of these things that are out there. And so that's something like I try to work in that phase where I'm basically listening, trying to connect on a personal level, develop real relationships, and then coming in with the practical information. And the reason I do it that way, let me just mention, is because if these types of women, and I don't know if the other women on the panel can agree, as a woman, forget I'm not a man, as a woman, if I speak publicly against feminism at this day and time, it is very hard. Women will attack you in 2 minutes on any form of social media, because I've seen it. And so we have to be a bit careful. And so that's why I say in this way. And the last point is, again, the other sisters touched on it, and I mentioned it in the beginning, it comes down to the Muslim household. So because our women are not seeing, they're seeing more of the cultural Islam versus the actual real Islam, they're not getting the real picture of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put forth for us as women. And so us as parents, we have to do a better job at making sure in our homes we're actually Islamically practicing, and we're not just following our culture because it's easy and familiar. And the other thing is, as parents, because we talked in the beginning about the self-worth piece, that we're building the self-esteem of our women. Our women are falling prey to way too many of these ideologies because, like we said, they're looking for the answers, and they don't feel they are strong enough in themselves, and they're looking for someone to guide and hold them up. And who am I? And it's something we can control from the inside if we start in the childhood process of making them feel really educated and understanding their place in the world and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does what he does.
Very important points there in terms of listening, first of all, to our Muslim women. We have to listen to their pains, listen to their, issues they're having. It's very important. I think that's one of the things that's not happening. We just tend to assume that we know what the problem is. We know what the solution is when we haven't actually listened to them. And your point about, having an Islamic practice at home. I mean, if you just teach our children just culture and cultural identity, then of course you'll have this identity crisis that we just touched upon earlier on. We have to provide this Islamic package at home from which they're nurtured, and when they go outside to school, college, and university, eventually they have this framework to live by from the very beginning, so they can actually have this backbone of Islamic education. And importantly, the point about self-esteem and confidence, and I think if we can put one message through from this stream, is to build the confidence that our Muslim women needs, that yes, you as a Muslim, Allah has given you the mind to understand the reason why Allah has created you, and that enough should give you the reason of your purpose in life and understanding of your place on earth. And once you've understood that, this should give you this utmost confidence that you need to take this journey anywhere in any society, whether that be hostile or not. So this self-esteem and confidence is paramount, it's important. And if we can drill this in our mindset, men and women, that this is important. We have to have this confidence, and this confidence leads the way. For example, if you did not have the confidence to wear the hijab or the niqab, you'll always feel there's something wrong. You'll always feel ashamed, always feel insecure. But when you have the confidence, nothing will remain is an obstacle in front of you. So Jazakallah khairan, Jazakumullah khairan, all of you. This is very, very important points that you've mentioned. So I appreciate the points are coming through from this talk, and especially from your perspective. Jazakallah khairan once again.
I believe Brother Muhammad wants to make a point, inshallah.
Yeah, so I just want to come in here with one sort of clarification, because there's a number of folks that may have joined midstream, unless they start thinking that we're sort of throwing sort of the entirety of feminist thought under the bus. This is not true. I think it's important to first of all appreciate that there was a genuine Western problem that they had in the US, in the UK, in France. And it came about because of their worldview. So the solutions they arrived at was articulated very early in the program by Ustadhah Aminah earlier. Now, the key thing to understand here is that this solution is not for us as Muslims. And for those that have adopted that thinking midway without understanding where it came from, is I think part of the reason we're having this disconnected discussion today, which is it's evolved. And certainly I think more recently the wave around what they would call this idea of intersectional feminism, where they realize this idea that, oh my goodness, we've been racist, we've been exclusive, it's been predominantly a white, female, Western, privileged kind of pursuit. Well, let's try and bring in some other concepts to it. And what we have right now is feminist, which was about rights to vote, is slowly morphed into a feminism of multifaceted approach, depending on where it lands, on culture, on background, etc., etc. And there's so much intersectionality now. I think they're sort of beginning to miss the point of why this thing happened. And I think this goes back, to the teachings in the Quran, where it's clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if it was not from Allah, it would be confusion. And this is exactly what we're seeing, where any ideology that is not from Allah clearly results in confusion across the board. And we're seeing the manifestation of it now. I just want to sort of make that point. And for those that came midstream, we recognize there was a problem in the West. It's a problem, but it wasn't our problem. It was their problem. And they created a solution that is now even worse.
Jazakallah khairan. So we have put the link for the guests to join us in the panel and ask questions, inshallah. While we are waiting for the guests to join us, is there any other point anyone wants to make, inshallah?
Can I make a point?
Yeah, sure.
I think Brother Mansur was asking me about gender roles, and I was maybe didn't answer that at that point. But I would say that even if you think from the point of equality, you have to see that aren't Muslim men and women equal as slaves of, aren't all men and women equal in the eyes of Allah as slaves of Allah? You know, women pray 5 times a day, men pray 5 times a day, fasting is the same, Hajj is the same, Zakat is the same. Why don't we consider these things as well? Then, in the eyes of law, you know, is there anything that prohibits that or says that the reward is different for a woman than a man? This is also equality if we even want to talk of in these terms. Then just in the family, the roles are different, but even then the roles, the difference of roles and maybe the gender roles are more defined within a family circle in Islam. We can say those roles are different, but they are not preferential. So these kinds of things should also be talked about. But again, as we also talked about, this was not our problem because we had this framework: Muslim men and women slaves of Allah, Muslim men and women in the eyes of law, you know, the family. And you know, even if anybody's studying the family fiqh, the fiqh of family in Islam, you will see that fiqh is built around women, the mother. So much preference is given to them. So, but the same thing, you know, it was never our problem. But when, you know, we started doing, which made people come up with this solution, it became our problem. But this, I think this point should be made very clear. Feminism was there for a reason, and we know that. This was their history. It's justified in many ways, and in many ways it's not. But then it was never our history. And I think that's the point that we are missing, that, you know, that was not our issue, that was not our problem. And another thing is that, you know, this is something we teach courses on in university, mistaken universals. Somehow we all have started to think whatever the definition the West has put out for anything is universal. And we don't question that. For example, insecurity. You know, if you take this word insecurity, or so-and-so person is insecure, you will see that that definition is very Western in its explanation. And that's the thing, that many Muslim children, they try to apply the Western definitions of things to Islam and therefore get very confused. So also the case of mistaken universals. You think everything that West has to teach is universal and never question it. And I think that's another issue that, you know, we should be focusing on.
I just want to remind our viewers who are joining in or will joining, inshallah, please be mindful and phrase your questions appropriately. And we don't want anything to, you know, harm anyone's understandings or anything. So this is a stream where we're trying to understand a subject. So be cordial in your question and to the topic that we are discussing, and be brief and concise. So we're going to bring in some guests now, inshallah.
Hello.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is, do you think feminism have influenced Muslim girls to ask for so much mahar? Like I'm a Muslim guy and I want to get married, and my friends tell me, like, when they want to get married, the girls ask for extremely high mahar.
Sure. Okay, Jazakallah, I've got your question.
Thank you very much.
Where are you calling from, Ahmed?
I'm calling from Palestine.
Okay, mashallah.
Okay.
Who would like to take that question?
I don't mind answering that one.
Yeah, go ahead, Sheikh.
No, I don't think feminism has anything to do with mahar. I think throughout Muslim history, if you really study, you'll find that there's been different classes of people and different communities and different countries that have had high mahars, you know. even at the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, there were women that the mahars had gone up so much that Umar tried to put a limit on the mahars, and then the women objected, and they said, well, according to the Quran, you can't limit the mahar. So then he didn't. So I don't think it's that. I think it's to do with society. It's to do with culture. It's to do with the way people are interacting, and again, it is very cultural. It's not an Islamic thing, because of course the Prophet ﷺ did encourage people to make marriage easy and make zina difficult. But unfortunately, I think in many countries we're seeing that people have high mahars, and that's usually coming from the families of the girls. It's not the girls themselves, So I really don't think you can really connect that to feminism. And I think we have to be careful as Muslims when we're discussing this topic, not to act as though our societies don't have any problems, Like when we say that the West had a problem, and so then our societies do have problems, I lived in Egypt. In Egypt, you have a massive sexual harassment problem. It doesn't matter how you dress as a Muslim woman, you have that problem, even if you're wearing niqab. And I'm sorry to bring that up, but I really think that we don't want to, as a community, exonerate ourselves and say we don't have corruption, we don't have crimes that are going on, right? That sometimes anger people and anger women, and then drive them to adopt certain ideologies. And so I think, along with trying to counter the feminist narrative, we also have to make a real effort to reform as in renew our societies, because what are our boys being taught when there's an epidemic of sexual harassment in a city like Cairo? What's happening to the tarbiyah of boys? So and
Sorry for
the reason why I
interrupting.
mention it in line with the mahar is because, again, why are Muslims having high mahars? Why, these are internal problems to do with tarbiyah, to do with the way we value things in society, right? That we need to start addressing from the ground up.
Understand, but like, shouldn't the amount of mahar, like the point of reference for the mahar should be like what the wives of the Prophet asked for? Like today, girls asked for like the tenth amount of they asked for 10 times what the wives of the Prophet asked, and I think like that's extremely high. I mean, there is a point where like it's high and it's extremely high. That's my problem. Like,
yeah, of course, like people should not be making them exorbitant. That's true, but there's no necessity for it to be exactly the same as the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's always been the case that, for example, upper class women would ask for higher mahars, right? It's not really something that's fixed, but at the same time, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for your situation to be resolved. And you're right that people should be making marriage easy.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Ahmed. Abdul Majid. Assalamu alaikum.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Brother Majid, yes. Where are you calling from, and what's your question, brother?
From Nairobi.
Okay.
With regards to the gender restrictions that we are all aware of, the present day, and I'm aware, and you have also mentioned that we have had women scholars in the past. With that in mind, how are they teaching their students? Was it in public or was it in private as well?
Sorry,
Okay,
I didn't
Jazakallah
get
khair,
the
brother.
question. Did you, Mansur?
So I think one of the key points in your question is how did the Muslim female scholar
Yes,
teach? Did they teach in public or in private? What was their method of teaching?
the gender restrictions that we are all aware of at the moment, with the hijab, niqab, and the like.
Okay, see.
Okay, who would like to take that?
I can answer this question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Ustadhah.
This is a very good question, and it gives us, more insight into what we are talking about these days. So yes, Muslim women did teach, and Sheikh Akram has a book that just came out, Muhaddisat. So he's talking about female scholars, and especially he's talking about the female scholars of Hadith India. And he has, brought about many records of that, and he's saying that, of course, the restrictions are there, and whenever a Muslim woman is in a public space, she will have to observe hijab. Okay? So the like covering herself and all of that, whatever that you have mentioned are there. But they did teach, and this is what it is, because Sayyida Nafisa was the teacher that we know in history, and she was the teacher of Imam Shafi'i. So if you look at many other scholars and you look at the line of their teacher, you see the women teachers are there. They took ijaza, especially in hadith, from women teachers, and they taught in many different places, but always with hijab. So that's the case. So maybe with the understanding might be that some of the teachers would sit behind a curtain and teach. Some of them would teach with their hijabs and niqabs on, but still sitting in front of the students. So that was done. But that was definitely done. So there was this, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the great hadith scholar, about his wife. He had a wife, her name was Anas Khatun, and she would give about public talks to people. And this is the legacy of Sayyida Aisha, that, she taught, she went up until Iraq to teach people. Yes, she taught behind a curtain. So yes, people taught like that, but people also taught with their hijabs on and things like that, and sitting in front of the students. Yes. So that was, I guess, so you have many records of women teaching, but that later on went down. But yes, women scholars were there and they were teaching. You can look at the chains of teachers that many prominent scholars have, and you will see the women teachers teaching there.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khairan. I hope this answers your question, Brother Abdul Majid. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. I've red pen. Assalamu alaikum. Please be brief with your question. We've got a lot of people trying to enter our stream.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
I just want to ask the sister as a woman how they can approach these verses in Quran, because these one of the verses that feminists attach to and give like a big issue. قوله تعالى واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن وهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعن لكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا وقوله تعالى الرجال قوامون على النساء. How do you give the approach of the understanding of these two verses? Because even men sometimes, they misunderstand these verses. This is my two questions for the sisters. And thank you, brothers. Barakallahu feekum jami'an.
Jazakallah khair. I believe this question was already answered on our last stream in detail by Ustad Daniel Hakikatu. So if you look at our last stream, inshallah, that will save us a lot of time.
Yeah, Brother Hashim, but I want the sister, how they approach, when they talk to women, how they give the understanding.
It's the same way, brother. Why would it differ?
Because, this is the issue of women. Because every time we approach feminists, they said, you explaining from your understanding as a man. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so you think there's a different understanding for...
I want them to be sure that it's how everyone understands Quran. It's not a man issue. That's my point. Thank you.
No, that's why I'm telling you it's not a man issue. But what I'm saying is that if some scholar or some brother or even some sister explains this to you in detail, and then you keep going and asking everybody else for the same question, then either you haven't understood the previous answer or you believe that the sisters will answer differently to the men.
No, you misunderstand. Yeah, it's not. I understand the verse, but
okay, brother, I think we got your question. I think you want a sister's perspective on this one.
Exactly.
So, any sister on the panel, if you wish to answer this question.
This is chapter Surah Al-Nisa, verse number 34, I believe.
So I can answer that. Rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa. So if you see that where that is placed in the Quran, this ayah is placed in the Quran in Surah An-Nisa. And the way Surah An-Nisa Surah An-Nisa starts with a very egalitarian message. Allah Ta'ala says in the beginning of Surah An-Nisa that He has created men and women from a single soul. So when we think about this verse in the Quran, الرجال قوامون على النساء, why we forget how the surah has started? And this qawam is higher in it's this qawam is not understood in manner of a ruler or a king or something like that. Qawam, if you look at the overall message of the Islam, if you look at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, men are supporters of the women. And if you look at that, they are higher. This qawam means that they are higher in responsibility. But that being said, we are all answerable to Allah Ta'ala. And because the problem is always that, because the women, they get confused with concept is that, because they think that women can do what men can do. And this framework creates the problem. It's not that, what they can do and what we can do. It's not about competition. It's about taking our worth and deriving our worth from Allah Ta'ala. So men being qawwam, why should we look it as a problem? I think we should be happy about it, that Allah Ta'ala gave men more responsibility. And Allah Ta'ala saved women from that responsibility, and Allah Ta'ala gave them a different. So this difference is never preferential. That's the problem, because when think qawwam is preferred. No, or a person who's qawwam is going to enter Jannah more easily than a person who is not a qawwam. That's not the thing. The qawwam is just a matter of responsibility, and this qawwama is within the family. A husband is a qawwam over the wife. And sometimes, and again, I will go back to that because this is my background, and as Fatima, Sister Fatima also highlighted, it's not that, we are blaming the West for everything, but yes, because we are Western, so we have to understand that this is our background, and so somehow we look at those things and not understand our own. And the thing is that this is a very Western lens again to look at things, because the West thinks if we accept the gender differences, it will lead to injustice. That's not what Islam is saying. Islam is saying it can be, they're not identical, but doesn't mean they're preferential either. So if a man is qawwam of the family, this is a very functional thing. But whoever reaches piety, whoever reaches to the grace of Allah Ta'ala, depends upon how much a person is pious, the level of taqwa and piety that has. So again, the thing is that this difference, this qawwama and everything is in terms of responsibility, and it is not preferential at all.
Okay, Jazakallah khair.
Fawzia?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
Jazakallah khair. This has been a wonderful conversation. I sort of want to pivot a little bit to talking about practicalities. So I think we all understand the real impact of feminism on the Muslim family. And I think in particular the impact on families that are either Black or African descent. And the reason I say this is that when we think about, and I don't like using this word because I think now it's very loaded, but that intersectionality. So you have on top of the feminism piece, you have that racism piece. And a lot of Black men or African men, unfortunately, it's hard for them to provide either that nafaqah or, that support for their families because of either underemployment or not given the economic access due to unfortunate racism within the systems. I'm sure you experience this in the UK as well. So what I would like to have a conversation about perhaps is how can we counteract this impact of feminism, whether it is economically, socially, other ways as a Muslim community, so that we can recalibrate and we can restore that balance and uplift the Muslim family. Jazakallah khair.
Who'd like to answer that question?
I don't mind, but I don't know if I fully caught the question. Is it that the problem of nafaqa, you said, in the family? Sorry, could you just repeat it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just in general. You know, sometimes as a result of feminism, and in some communities, you find that, you know, the men in this community, they're insufficient, they're not good, you know, there's nobody good to marry, and that could be as a result of, you know, the feminist mindset, coupled with the inability, I think, and sometimes the inability to have that economic, like the opportunities for employment, or you know, just the economic, I guess, self-sufficiency in some communities as a result of racism, or, you know, not having access to opportunities. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how, as women, we can counteract this narrative, because I suspect that's another reason why feminism is so prevalent, because of course there's all these systemic barriers that's preventing or creating barriers, essentially. And how can we as Muslim women support men further, because we are living, unfortunately, in a system that is so entrenched in feminism. Does that make sense? Or
I think so. Well, I think one of the things I would say is, I think our entire community needs to get out of the victimhood mentality, you know. Sometimes we've adopted these ideas of white privilege, you know, the society is stacked against us, etc., etc. And of course there's oppression in society. Of course there are, you know, inequalities and struggles. But I would argue that every single human being, every strata of society has its privileges, right? And its, you know, disadvantages, right? So as a Muslim, I believe that we should consider ourselves to have Muslim privilege. You know, if you've grown up with Islam, you've grown up knowing your purpose in life, your creator, having a connection with your creator. That is the ultimate privilege. And so I believe we should be, instead of perpetuating this narrative, which is very prevalent in society today, that, you know, black people, brown people, so-called BAME, POCs, right? Terms which I hate, absolutely hate. You know, instead of perpetuating this narrative that we're all victims, no, we need to create our own narrative. And that is that this life can be a struggle, but all of us have the ability to rise above, to strive, to struggle, and to, you know, make a success of ourselves. We do have the ability to do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that agency and ability. So I think if there are problems of, you know, men, I think what the sister was highlighting is men not being able to meet their obligations. I think, again, that's something that we're going to have to look into in our own communities and understand how are we raising our boys? What support mechanisms have we put into place to help young people get married, you know, and to be able to support families and things like that. So I don't personally think we need to buy into any of those kind of victim narratives. Instead, I think we should work hard. We should raise boys and girls who are hardworking and who understand their obligations and strive to fulfill those obligations. And at the same time, we should raise daughters who understand that life isn't plain sailing. Sometimes there might be financial problems in a couple. You know, you could marry a rich man and then, you know, you fall on hard times. That kind of resilience and tawakkul and, you know, ability to live within the means and those kinds of things. Those are the bread and butter qualities I think that we need to be instilling in our kids, and that will help, inshallah.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to please explain me the meaning of ma malakat, the woman's slave. These slaves are the slave, and the masters can do anything with that slave? Please explain the Quranic word ma malakat.
Sure. Before we even attempt to answer this question, have you tried reading some of the tafsir material on this? I'm sure the answers are all there, rather than coming on a live stream and asking this question, which is, well understood what this refers to. In what we are dealing with, we're trying to understand the impact of feminism, what the world is suffering from, rather than some of the questions that you might be having. So, I'm going to filter now because we are mindful of a lot of questions coming through and a lot of people are waiting. So if anyone wants to take that question, otherwise I'm going to move on to other callers who are waiting.
I don't mind just quickly saying about that because I guess the reason why the brother is bringing it up is because sometimes feminists do bring it up, right? So I think the point is that slavery was a system that existed in the past, and having female slaves was part of that, and it was usually to do with integrating prisoners of war into the Muslim community, right? So after a battle, how to integrate the prisoners from the other side into the Muslim community, and the system was there that you had slaves who would then be attached to a particular person or a particular family, and it's as simple as that. That's it. And that was a system that existed. It no longer exists. So I don't think it's really relevant. Even when we were studying fiqh, when we came to the slavery chapters, our shuyukh said, it's really not relevant today. So, now that there's a consensus in the world that, okay, this particular practice has now been stopped, or it's something that human beings have agreed that we're not going to take part in this, it's fine, for the Muslim community to move on from it. And so I don't think we need to worry about it, inshallah.
Thank you. Okay. Next we have Ina Kali Ibrahim. You're muted. Can you hear us? Is it
unmuting mic, please?
I think I lost her.
Bar in the moon. Can you hear us?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes, we can. Yes.
I feel like what the sisters are saying is so true, especially what Mindful Muslimah said about how we need to listen to our Muslim women, and when they're coming and talking about genuine problems that they're having in their home. And for example, why feminism is attractive is because when Muslim women come with genuine problems, they're called emotional and they're called all these other things, and they're not listened to. They're labeled, and that's why they're going to turn to feminists who are, agreeing with their reality, with that genuine Muslim woman who's at home and facing that inequality. So I really think it's wrong when, for example, yesterday when that Muslim woman came on the live stream, I really have to bring this up because I really feel like she was not treated right, and we did not listen to her, and she said she was not a feminist, and she said that she was facing genuine inequality in her household by her parents, seeing her and her brother differently. But she was labeled as, oh, she's deluded, she's emotional, she's just a feminist, even though she said that she wasn't. And I feel like we really
actually, sister, with all due respect, I don't think anyone on the panel used those words. Maybe in the comment section, but we are not obviously responsible for all of them. So
yes, I understand, but Daniel did say that
she was deluded.
I forgot. No, that we have to talk about reality. even though she was telling her, you know, her what's happening in her home. And Hashim, you did say that, oh, you think she's having a personal problem, a personal issue with Daniel. But it's no, she's not having a personal issue with Daniel that she's bringing up. She's telling what issues she's really facing.
No, actually, if you remember, the issue was something that I wasn't aware of, about a tweet that I was completely unaware of. And that's why I said that this is something to do with something, not what we discussed in the panel here, but something outside of it. That's what I meant by personal. And also, if you remember, we asked specifically what the issue was troubling her in the family. And she said it's private. She doesn't want to go into it. So no, I think it'll be better, look, instead of
I'm sorry, but she did bring it up. She did. She gave a specific example. She didn't want to speak about her dad's job, but she specifically said that when she has studying or assignments or, you know, things like emergency things to do, her brother helping her out in the cooking and cleaning is not even an option. And that's not okay. Right. And she did. She specifically.
So when you say that it's not okay, no, I get you. I mean, I understand. We should have been probably more sympathetic towards her.
Yeah.
I would say her issue at home. But do you think that her family treating the siblings differently is something that Islam promotes? It's something that that is part of what Islam teaches, or is this something? And the onus of taking care of that issue is with the parents? Where do you think the problem lies?
I definitely don't think an Islamic thing, but when a sister comes to you with those kind of issues and you say, oh, it's not Islam, it's like, no, these are Muslim parents that are doing this. So it has to become an Islamic issue where we have to talk to the Muslim parents.
Okay. So do you think the blame there lies with the parents for treating the siblings differently?
Yeah. So I feel like, okay, a girl can cook and clean, but if she has studying to do, she shouldn't watch her brother lay on the couch. He could just help her, you know? And this should be implemented in boys, this idea that men, no matter what, they shouldn't even be in the kitchen. I feel like it's a wrong, it makes Muslim women feel like, oh, I'm just a machine to cook and clean. My studying doesn't matter. And for example, the brother brought up how Islam, women are allowed to study. And we love to say this as Muslims, but when there's a real issue with a Muslim girl, there's loads of Muslim girls who face this at home. They're made to feel like their studying is nothing, that the priority is cooking and cleaning. It doesn't mean anything when you tell them Islam, oh, women are allowed to study.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I believe Sister Mindful Muslimah touched upon this, where you kind of mix culture with religion, and it's kind of dangerous, and that's where the problem arises. So perhaps the sister might want to elaborate on that point, inshallah.
I think both of you touched on an important point, which is empathy and sympathizing, and the fact that, for example, there's so many other groups that are willing to take a sister like this who's having a particular feeling of, you know, oh, this was, you know, no one's hearing me right now. I feel like this is unfair. And then other groups will say, yes, it is unfair. Oh, come to us. And this is what's happening to our women. And yes, it is cultural over Islamic, because we all know that Rasul, he helped out in the home. He helped out in the home. So this is not from our Islam. But like we said, like this Sister Fatima touched on, that we have a lot of our own problems. And what I think, what I was trying to mention, and what many of us are touching on now, is we're not addressing our problems. So our women are going otherwise for solutions. They're looking for someone who will listen. And the moment someone listens, because they are suffering with this pain and this self-esteem issue and everything else, the first person who will listen, they say, oh, look, you know, they will hear me. So what else do they have to say? Whether it's Islamically good for us or not. And that is the danger. And so that's why I'm grateful for this platform, because we need to touch on this so that we can say, well, we obviously need to address these issues with our women and stop brushing them off, because they lead to bigger issues.
Especially when they feel like my Muslim people, they're not listening to me. And look, I have this person who doesn't believe in Islam and they're listening to me. They will be more attracted to them, especially when a lot of Muslim girls, they just see feminism as equal to women's rights. They don't understand the baggage. Once they accept that, I'm telling you, they start believing other things like abortion and all these other horrible things that come along with it. You see them start to parrot these things as well. And
that's why a lot of people apostate in the US as well, because then the evangelists over here, they swoop right in. You know, like, for example, when our women are suffering from domestic violence issues, the churches open their doors. and then they start to feed them and so forth. So yeah, this is an important issue. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and inshallah we can be more sympathetic to that Muslim sister, maybe even apologize, because honestly it made me really, really upset what happened yesterday, and especially those in the comments, please, what you said to that sister yesterday was horrible, and there's not millions but thousands of sisters who are going to watch that video and read your comments and think, oh, if I speak about any injustice, I must be emotional, I must be deluded, and this is not right. But thank you so much.
All right, Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khairan.
Brothers, can I just mention something here? I think the point that the sister made, it really highlights something that I've been experiencing as well, which is that I've been taking sessions with teenage girls, and one of the things you find is they have a lot of these types of complaints, you know. So there are perceived or real injustices, or, you know, unfair treatment and complaints that they have within their homes, and I think or that they've heard of in the Muslim society, or misconceptions they have about Islam, and then because nobody is willing to really engage with them, you know, and not willing to listen and not willing to gently explain something properly, I think some of them get very disenfranchised with our own community. So yeah, I think it is very important to understand that often, you know, Brother Hamza always says that people who have doubts in Islam, often there's an emotional reason for those doubts, right? There's something that happened to them, you know, they were beaten in the mosque by some sheikh, or you know, whatever it is, and they've taken that experience, because as human beings we are emotional, you know, we're not purely rational. We will take that experience and then we will, you know, extend it and think that maybe this is what Islam is teaching because my dad's religious, my mom's religious, etc. So yeah, I do think it is very important for us to provide sympathy, support and empathy to people, and to reinforce to them that those attitudes are not Islamic necessarily. Maybe they're part of that culture, and if you want to change culture, the way you do it is by raising children and, you know, changing the culture of your own community through working hard, engaging, etc.
Barakallah feek. Brother Afzal, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Please state where you're from, where you're calling from, and what's your question?
Can you guys hear me, guys?
Yeah, we can hear.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Afzal. I'm from Afghanistan. And my question was, we can use the history of our Islamic history, like kings and caliphs, that women were as a queens or as a something in the history. Can we use history as a to justify that feminism or women's rights in Islam? Not feminism, women's rights in Islam.
Can we use history to justify women's right in Islam? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Islamic history of women.
Oh yeah, okay.
I can take this question.
Okay.
So, yes, brother, that's a very good thought. I truly think that Islamic history and Sirah being part of that, starting with the Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ, we can highlight these role models, because role models are needed, especially for younger people and for us all. So when we see role models, we try to, you know, emulate them. So I think Islamic history and, you know, especially the Sirah. But do understand that there is Islamic history and then there is a Muslim part to it, which is not that perfect. So, you know, because Islam is perfect, not the Muslims. So, but yes, I think that's a very good resource, and we can bring out some good role models from there and present it, of course. Why not?
Okay, okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. Let's bring in Suboor. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. I just randomly joined and saw this great panel. I thought, why not just jump in? So my question is to Raja Bhai, that, you know, in Pakistan, we're obviously seeing the genesis of feminism and the West is far ahead. But something that I experienced, and I maybe want you to give your perspective from your sort of from your wide experience across the country, I found the feminists in Pakistan to be very vulgar, right? I was in Government College Lahore and all these other places, and it wasn't like moderate feminism, it was like a radical feminism. So could you just give a few thoughts on that, please?
Jazakumullah khairan, bro Suboor. It's good to see you here, mashallah. What I'll say is that the mainstream majority of women in Pakistan are not pro-feminism. As a matter of fact, you know, we have the Aurat March here every year, but right parallel to that Aurat March, there's another march happening, which is, I think, known as the Haya March or something similar. And these are also women who are wearing hijab, maybe niqab, and they are practicing Muslim women who also march for actual women's rights. And they don't get highlighted on the mainstream media, but who do get the media attention is actually the people from the Aurat March. And yes, you are correct in saying that over the past few years, last 2-3 years, the kind of banners and placards that they've been displaying in the Aurat March, they have been quite obscene, first and foremost. Then the kind of display of dance and song that they're doing over there, a lot of the stuff that's happening, I mean, one wonders, even if a person is very neutral, you wonder that, what has all of this got to do with women's rights anyway? I mean, all of that stuff that's going on, what has that got to do with real women's issues? That, like, for example, the sister who came on and mentioned about, inequality in the household, or what real Muslim women go through. So how is that even relevant? So in a way you do find that. And if you want to really like put it down in a box, I would say that it's the feminist movement along with the kind of Marxist movement that have kind of joined hands, and this is the net product that we're seeing at the Aurat March and similar kind of campaigns that are happening across the country.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. It's definitely, like you said, it's like a radical Marxist vein that they take. I'm glad to hear about the Haya March. I didn't know about it. Good stuff. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Suboor. Can I just say salam to Brother Suboor?
Wa alaikum salam, sister. How are you doing?
My former colleague. Alhamdulillah. Fine, alhamdulillah.
Brother Suboor, inshallah. Hope to see you more often, inshallah. Yes. Right, we got another brother here. Brother Ahmad, salam alaikum.
Could I just ask a quick question to Brother Raja? Brother, as a follow-up to what Brother Suboor asked, do you see, like with the other march, do you see the ladies having valid complaints? And how do the Muslim leaders, especially the religious leaders, how did they respond to the genuine kind of complaints and things like that?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair for that question. Well, the other march that is happening, it's basically done by one of the mainstream political parties in Pakistan, which is a kind of a religious political party. And they basically gather the women under one banner, because what happened was that over the last few years, when a lot of the practicing Muslim sisters, they decided to join the Aurat March, they found that their voices were not being heard, or they found that a lot of the other claims that were being made, or a lot of the other rights that were being championed, they were not agreeing with those rights at all. Like, for example, as I mentioned, that the right for abortion and this kind of having this open sexuality, this type of stuff, because a lot of that was not resonating with people who actually went there the last maybe 2-3 years ago. And so every year you find that people who even at that point came under the impression that Aurat March is actually very, very pro women's rights, they realized that under the garb of women's rights, a lot of other demands were being also asked for, which a lot of people didn't agree with. And as far as the general public is concerned, I think a lot of people really were happy that there were women who were asking for actual women's rights. They were asking for the rights that actually Islam already gives women. But as the sister also pointed out earlier, that we and I think a lot of you also spoke about that a lot of times it happens that Islam is giving a lot of rights, but the people aren't giving those rights. So we are completely okay with helping our sisters out in terms of getting those rights. If they're not getting their share of the inheritance, or if they're facing domestic violence, or if there's anything else that they're actually going through, we don't mind. I mean, and when I say we, I mean the religious community of Pakistan. They don't shy away from these things, and I think whenever given the opportunity, we do speak about it. But I think at the core of it is tarbiyah of the massive population that we have. And this is where the problem lies. So it is doing tarbiyah of the mother, it's doing tarbiyah of the father, and then that's because that's where the family unit starts. It starts with the husband and the wife. And so I remember going on a particular talk show, and all of the women there on the panel were basically very, very pro feminism, very, very pro Aurat March. And so one of the questions that came to me was that, how can we fix the patriarchy? How can we fix this misogynistic attitude that men have? I was like, the first and foremost place of education for any child is the lap of the mother. That's where it all starts. So if you want to remove patriarchy, start teaching this to your young boys from a very early age, because at the early age, if you, as Napoleon said, give me great mothers and I'll give you a great nation. So it all starts from the household, because now when you look at the whole corporate system from a very early age, women are told to go out into the workplace. So where does the child go? The child goes into daycare. So who's teaching about patriarchy at the daycare? Who's teaching these things at the Montessori level, school level, college level, university level? So I think it's a lot more to do with tarbiyah of the masses than anything else. And I think people, as I said earlier, that people already have inclination towards Islam. It's just about, guiding them towards that way, and educating them about what Islam is and what our culture is, and where the difference lies between the two.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, brother Ahmed. Do you want to unmute yourself and state your question, please?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you guys? You guys good?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, so I'm just here to reply to the girl that literally just went regarding Daniel. Allah has honored women greatly. He honors them as daughters, mothers, and wives, and gives them rights and virtues, and enjoys good treatments in ways that are not shared by men in many cases. And just to give context to what, and I want to see the sisters as well to react to this. I'm not sure if they know what exactly happened regarding that situation, but there was a Muslimah who posted a tweet, and I'll read you the tweet now, which was, if rape was about how revealing clothes were, then women fully covered in niqabs and jilbabs would not get raped, but they do. And Brother Daniel replied saying, if seatbelts were about saving lives, then people wearing seatbelts would never die in car crashes, but they do. So I feel like Daniel was, that the girl that came on previously, she was going based off emotion. And what Daniel was trying to say, that she's more sensitive towards her own personal situation rather than the Muslims who are feeling let down. Because when we have, I don't want to backbite or anything like that. May Allah bless the sister who posted the tweet and guide her. But this type of tweet that it's almost demonizing the role that hijab and jilbab have in society. Like it's almost saying it has no use, it has no value. And I felt like Brother Daniel was trying to defend the right, and that the jilbab in fact does have a Muslim identity. It does have benefit. It has rational behind it. And I did feel that what the sister said was unfair regarding Brother Daniel's comments. And yeah, I just want to have the sister's intake on that.
Yeah, let's not make that more controversial than what it already is. The main point I think everybody is saying is that we should be more sympathetic in our approach. Maybe some people take the words in a different way. Okay, maybe they think it's something which is harsh or something. We get the same, criticism when we are at Speaker's Corner. In the way we speak, sometimes it might come across as harsh and not sympathetic. We can't be in that state all the time. So depending on the emotion, depending on the conversation, it can differ. From at the end of the day, we are all human, yes. But the most important thing is that the issue is that Daniel wanted to basically focus on in that particular conversation was the sister was having some issue with the siblings being unfairly treated by the parents. And I think that is a bit that Daniel did not probably understand or get, or probably didn't hear it. So he asked her again, what is the problem? And she didn't want to say. And then the conversation started about the tweet. So let's not prolong this any longer, because we got lost.
Anyway, brother, let's not drag this any further. This is not a platform where we're trying to, just go about people and personality. The issue is about, as Sheikh Fatima and Sister Muslim Mindful Muslim already touched upon, we need to listen with empathy and with sympathy. I mean, there's no ifs and buts on these issues unless we listen and understand, and also need to, appreciate that people's perception may vary. I mean, sometimes, I don't really think how people view me when I speak very loudly, and only when I look at the comments. For example, when I rewatch my videos, I realize people are saying, you're being very harsh, but that was never my intention. So often our perception are misunderstood or even seen differently. So we have to really have some kind of introspection as well, just to see, how do we come across people? So if we don't, view ourselves in this lens, if we are, in public, like for example, now I have to really be mindful in terms of the language that I use, in the tone that I use, how polite I'm coming across or not. So this is a lesson and education for everyone. And inshallah, may Allah guide us to this knowledge and understanding, so that, we can all benefit from each other, so that, in the end, at the end of the day, we aim to learn and use that knowledge in practice for the benefit of the people. So Jazakallah khairan for coming along, brother. Assalamu alaikum. Let's hear from Stelina. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. You can hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, great. Well, nice to see you again. Right. I live in Sweden, and we have a lot of Muslims and Muslimahs here. And I don't know about you, which country you come from, you sisters, but I wonder if it's difficult to keep your, rights working in a different society, how hard that can be as a Muslimah. If you have any experience.
I don't know if you want to go first, sisters, or...
Go ahead.
Any of you is good.
Okay. So it's funny, I often hear this argument from women that I can't get a job because, with hijab, and I can't do this and I can't do that. But I think that I have, sometimes you have to, that trust fall, when you have friends and you have to put your arms back and you have to trust and that they're going to catch you. Like once you've done enough, and I hate to say it like that, but this is what more of our women, I feel like I wish if they would do. If you do more trust falls with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you say, you know what, I'm going to do it the way he says for me to do it, even though society tells me it probably won't work out, and I'm going to do it anyway. So I did that over and over. And I was able to go all the way to the top and make 6 figures and everything, and work for very prominent figures of state and government with my attire. So I don't buy to that narrative to women, only because I had the same opportunity as many other people. But if you remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells our women and tells our men equally, when you do things like the brother was touching on for the right intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he opens doors for you. When you forsake what everyone else wants and you only say, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah, and you renew your intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he can do anything for you. So when I have this mentality, I find myself sore. But if I keep acting like hijab is a barrier to my achievement, and then we have to ask, what is achievement? What is success? Redefine. Like the sister said, words are powerful. I don't find it problematic, even though I live in New York and it's my president was Trump and many other things. I'm not going to say, I think we get the picture. I still was doing all of this. So I didn't feel it. Alhamdulillah.
Right. Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
Just
Because
to give you guys a background, I believe Sister Lena is a new Muslim. How long you been a Muslim, Sister Lena?
Since March 14th, the first night of Shaban.
Welcome, sister. Welcome.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Lina. Sister Lina, I'm in Britain, and in Britain, I think the hijab has, especially in the cities, it's become very normal, you know, and especially in London, you know, they call London Londonistan, you know, so there's a reason for that. And I think there are even areas where the niqab is normal, you know, in London. So I think British people generally, and especially Londoners, are very accepting and, in my experience, and they have been very accommodating, you know, culturally sensitive and all of that. But I know that in some places like France, unfortunately, like recently, I think there are some new laws that are being brought in that, you know, trying to limit or stop Muslim women from wearing hijab until they're over a certain age, or limiting them from wearing hijab in certain settings. And I think what that highlights is, and it's kind of linked to feminism in the sense that often it's feminist type arguments that are used for, you know, banning hijab or criticizing hijab. I think what it highlights is that the hijab is seen as a symbol of our adherence to our deen, you know. It really is a strong symbol, and that's been the case since colonialist times, as Ustadhah Aminah highlighted. In colonialist times, the hijab was seen as a symbol of how far the colonizers had been successful in culturally colonizing the society, right? When women stopped wearing hijab, especially, for example, in Algeria, you know, you have accounts of how the French tried to stop women. They had advertising campaigns to try to, and incentivized Muslim, to Muslim men, that if their wives would stop veiling, they would have better positions in government and different kind of civil service positions. So, subhanAllah, like the hijab is a very powerful symbol, and it's become that. And it also shows you how powerful and influential those who would like to see Islam diminished in the West, and there are many people, you know, especially on the far right, etc., who want that. It shows you how much they see that Muslim women are influential and powerful, because, and it's a cliche, but it's absolutely true, we are half of the ummah and we give birth to the other half. So if Muslim women's adherence to their deen can be weakened, you get the whole population, right? In one generation, you can just change everything. So I think we need to be aware that these things are going on. You know, many Western countries, they accepted Muslims, and especially immigration, thinking that within a generation, we would be like, you know, completely assimilated and become completely westernized and liberalized. But I think they're kind of scratching their heads and thinking, well, how come, you know, like this new generation just seems to be more attached to Islam, you know, than even the past one. So I think it's important that we reach out, that we don't become ghettos, that we don't ghettoize ourselves, you know, as communities, and that we help people to understand the Islamic practices that we are adopting, right? Like throughout my childhood, going to school, my teachers were always asking me, I was usually the only one wearing hijab at school. I was always asked, do you wear that to sleep? You know, are you, you know, why do you wear that? Why do you have to cover your head? Are you bald under there? You know, I was asked all these kinds of questions. And of course, sometimes it gets a bit annoying. But alhamdulillah, my dad used to say, just answer people nicely, you know, explain it to them, increase people's understanding. And I think that's really what we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ustadhah Aminah, do you have any points to add?
You know, I just was, Sister Lina, you know, mashallah, congratulations, first of all. Secondly, I live in Texas, Dallas, and you know, Texas, Dallas is considered to be like a Bible Belt kind of a thing. But over here, I have seen that, you know, here and there, whenever issues like this have come up, that people didn't get a certain job because of wearing hijab, that issue was taken up, and that issue was really, elaborated. The media took a stand on that. So we do think that, Muslim women wearing hijab and being persistent about it is making a mark. So in the past 2 years, this is what I've seen. And personally, I'm in academia, and I teach faiths, different faiths. And I see that, me wearing my abaya and my hijab and teaching a class and teaching people of different faiths is always very welcomed in a good way.
Right. Well, sounds interesting because I used to work as a substitute, and I heard that if you put a shawl or a hijab, you're not allowed in.
Oh, wow.
And even though we don't have any official rules or regulations, I think that the principal or the school might do this, freehand, as they please from community to community. I'm not too sure about that, but they were totally forbidden.
Yes.
And aboard. So
it goes from a person to person and from organization to organization. Yes.
Yes. So it's I'm sorry. I think I'm losing you guys here. The internet has been weak here today.
You're welcome to Londonistan anytime, sister.
Yes, thank you. Great.
Barakallah feek. Go to Assalamu alaikum. Sister or brother Zamzam, last time you were a brother, so I don't know how to address you.
That was my brother. Sorry about that. Assalamu alaikum, sisters. MashaAllah, it was a really good stream. I've learned a lot. But I just had a question. Other than culture, there is extremist shiur who, if you listen to them, they belittle women using hadiths and Qur'ans and stuff like that. And that's scary because alhamdulillah, I know my religion, alhamdulillah, and I know my Rabb and everything. So it doesn't get to me. But if other people watch it, they seem like, what's going on, really? So I just wanted to say, how can we approach them?
That's a good question, actually. So you're right, sisters, that there are certain individuals who do something just like that. But we can, first of all, understand that this is something that they do. And still, at the end of the day, even if a person is a sheikh or a person is a person of knowledge, still at the end of the day, they are human beings. And human beings can make mistakes. We do not attach our deen to personalities. So we learn what is good and we leave what is not. So that's the one thing. But how to approach them? I think, we should raise our arguments, then raise our voices. I truly believe in that. And I truly think that, if we want to reply to them, we might better give a better, argument in regards to that and not try to take them on, probably, my approach is that why waste time in taking them, on and, going into arguments with them? Why don't we, teach people in a better way and people and then give the choice to people, then they can decide what is wrong and what is right. At the end of the day, I'll tell you this, if people are really willing to learn, they will learn the right thing. But if people are not willing to learn and they want to stick with what they think is right or what benefit their interest, nobody can teach them at all.
Can I make a little comment there?
So
Just
true,
a question, Sister Zamzam. It's an interesting question. I think one of the problems in our age is that fiqh and Islamic preaching has become so internationalized that sometimes something that might be true for one country and one culture, we're hearing it in a different context, in a different culture, and it doesn't make sense to us, right? So, for example, just as a typical thing, like say, this might be a crude example, but like say you live in Saudi Arabia and you ask a sheikh, is it okay to wear trousers, right, for a woman? And the sheikh, I've heard shiuk in the past say, no, a woman shouldn't wear trousers. Trousers are men's clothes, meaning inside the home even. And that might be true for that culture, because in that culture, women never wear trousers, right? But in the West, for example, we know that there are women's trousers and men's trousers. We know there's a difference, right? And we have a different culture. So sometimes we hear that fatwa or that opinion from a scholar in another country that might be true for that country because that's seen as men's clothes, for example. And we think, oh, that's so extreme, right? Because it feels like that for our context in our country. And that's the thing about fiqh, that when it comes to Islamic law, you know, we're encouraged to seek opinions and fatwa from the scholars that are in our context, in our locality, especially if we can, especially those who understand our culture and our, you know, the nuances of our culture. And so I think sometimes it's just a case of cultural difference. And so I don't think we need to be combative. And I think even within the West, you know, I've been to classes where the shuyukh wouldn't allow sisters to ask questions, right? Because they said, you know, the sister's voice might be attractive and I don't know what, right? What reason they used. And then I went to classes where the shuyukh didn't see that as a problem. And they knew that, well, they understood that if a sister asks a question with good adab and a good way, and, you know, women need to study their deen as well, then that's fine, you know. So I think what we should do is seek out the scholars who we can study with, who we can see have a good understanding. And we should, instead of trying to refute those who we don't agree with, rather than that, you know, go and study with the ones that we can, you know, understand that they do understand our context and our needs.
Jazakallah khair, Ustadhah, Sheikha. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
We'll just go to Brother Bhatti very quickly. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallah.
Do you have any questions for our
yes, brothers. Thank you very much for women representation today. I was very much in question last stream. Where are the women? Women did came. I have a question, a little bit personal reflection. I completely agree with panel that we should listen to those girls who have few complaints, emotional issues, and resolve them accordingly. But domestic issues, it got nothing to do with sometime a broader Islamic culture. Domestic issue and cultural issues, where what happening in the walls around the house, we have a lot of examples. I won't go too far complaining about emotional status of young girls who came last time or today, but I can tell them as a man, I am the master of how to change nappies of my son. I am really doing everything what we can. No man can deny any sort of house chores if he sees that their wives or sisters are, you know, struggling. It goes back to the teaching and educating yourself in your home. Sometimes we need to address ourselves, the young sister who came before, that, you know, not every man in the household is a bossy or a bad person. He's your brother, he's your father, and absolutely mothers also has a great role to educating how to be equal, not equal in a way, but equated. I can't pronounce the word the sister was discussing before. So it is, yeah, okay, yes, that's the word, brother Mansur. Okay, so what happens? Before I joined the stream, I just finished vacuuming the house. I would love for my wife to go and mow the lawn, but she can't do it. I do that too. But wherever we see the need, we are supposed to be always there. It's nothing to do with a man is sitting always and waiting for the dinner. It happens in the majority of houses, probably. But as a husband, I'm so proud that I was able to contribute towards my family when I'm changing kids' nappies and I'm looking after kids as well. I understand not many men do that, but I was feeling good about it that I contributed towards my family. If we look at this way, that a lot of women, my head goes towards them. They do a lot more than men. And we need to appreciate that. And those women who do a lot in our homes, they need to also take pride, and not like a complainsive, but take pride what they have contributed towards families. And they are assets. Everybody, as all these girls up there, my sisters have said, we all have been given roles. We are not really equal. Man is a man, a woman is a woman. Man cannot be a woman, and woman cannot be man. That's totally broad subject. But in a home environment, a lot of girls have some issues, emotional issues, complaints that can be addressed by listening by some of the helping workers, social workers. And also, it goes back to again what I initially said, our own household environment, how we train our kids. And I'm thankful to my great mother. Again, there is a woman who taught us to respect each other at home, look after each other the way we could, and give hand towards each other. Thank you for giving me opportunity, Brother Mansur, to say my few words. And sister probably going to say something. I will carefully listen. Thank you.
You can listen in the back chat. Okay.
Jazakallah khairan, brother. It was nice to hear, you speak in that way. You sound like a very supportive husband. And I think you're right, that these are human characteristics, right? Like human beings, if you see another human being struggling, you help out. It's got nothing to do with, and I think we need to get out of that mindset, don't we, of my rights and your rights. And, it's really not about that. It's about mutual cooperation, right? That's how a healthy home is built. So yeah, I think it's important that parents are aware of that. And there's so many things like emphasizing, aren't there, in Islam, the equal treatment between children. And I think that's something that I'm not saying that boys and girls need to be brought up in exactly the same way necessarily. No, but what I'm saying is that parents have to be very aware that children don't grow up with complexes because they feel that one sibling was treated nicer than the other. Like you said, these are human things. These are not really strictly to do with religion per se, or because obviously Islam teaches us to care about one another and to fulfill each other's needs, and that's a general thing, right? You don't need to be told that. Yeah, that's something that as a human being you should want to do. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Absolutely.
If I can just add one thing to that, if we just add this layer to it, there's Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He used to do housework in his own home, and add this too, so that this might become a source of, piety for us. So if he is the best of a human being can do it, who else is left then?
Yes, Sister Aminah, I absolutely agree. But some of our sisters have this issue. I heard it. I relate to it. There is huge culture issues, some part of this world. We understand that. But we need these men to come out as well to say, look, we are here. We do what we can as well. This is not the issue that we should have to go to a live stream and complain about our home issues. I understand this may be going towards a lot of other households in particular country, for example, or for certain cultures. But I am quite confident a woman who is such educated and who is so brave, who can come live on a stream and raise issues of her personal home, can raise this issue within her home as well.
Inshallah.
And she can definitely address this. Thank you, Brother Mansur. I was going back to that issue. My apology, but inshallah.
Can I just highlight one more thing regarding this topic, because just so that it's not too one-sided. I want to also say that I think as women and as daughters, we also need to be brought up to recognize what the men are doing, outside the home, right? So in a typical Muslim family, the man is responsible for earning the money and providing for the family, and the woman is obviously going to be somebody needs to take care of the home and raise the children, right? So sometimes what happens is, because society for some reason considers having a career and going out and working as some kind of privilege, right, rather than seeing it as a burden and also a challenge and a difficulty, what can happen is we grow up thinking, well, dad is lying, sitting around, and mom is doing the work, when actually dad has been slogging away all day, right? But he's now come home and he's relaxing. So give him a chance to relax, right? So I think along with saying that, of course, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to help in the house where it was needed, etc., etc. At the same time, we've got to point out sometimes to the younger generation and to our children what their dads are doing, because sometimes they see dad relaxing at home. They don't realize that he's been facing the world, he's been dealing with all these difficulties, he's got all the financial problems in his head, right? And so there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's an honor for a wife to be, serving her husband. In fact, I'm sure my husband would rather I was there right now helping him out with something.
Sure.
I think the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala captures it quite well in Surah An-Nisa, the same chapter about women, in verse number 32, where he says, "And do not wish for that by which Allah has made some of you exceed others. For men is a share of what they have earned, and for women is a share of what they have earned. And ask Allah for His bounty." So what I believe in this stream and the last stream we were trying to highlight is the fact that feminism somehow is opposed to what Allah has ordained in the Quran. Yes, that God has ordained for His creation. And they want to break the families apart. They want to break society apart in a way with their own whims and desires, that they want to show this equality in socio-political, economic, all aspects, when in reality we have different ways of approaching our issues, our problems, and our the socio-political, economic aspects. So this is something I think we wanted to highlight from this particular stream. And now that we are nearing the end of the stream, we got only 2 more guests, I believe. So inshallah, we should be wrapping up fairly quickly. I want to once again thank from the bottom of my heart for all the sisters and all those Ustadhahs who have come on our panel and spent the time, nearly 3 hours, I think more than 3 hours now, leaving the families and their children to be taken care of by the dads, I'm assuming. So Jazakallah khair for that, Ustadhahs.
So we have Badriya.
Yeah, Sister Badriya. You're unmuted. Sorry, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
salam.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, is it? It's unmuted, I think.
No,
we can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me properly? Because my connection is kind of bad.
We can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so I had a question on, I just wanted to ask, is it okay for me to be someone who focuses on their career and pushes that more in than maybe say becoming a mother and becoming a wife, for example, all of these things, even though that is part of the sunnah to become a wife and to fulfill half your deen in that way, but at the same time I want to lead a balanced life, and I don't want to push just one area of the deen on myself. If Allah has opened the door of a career for me, I'm going to go through that, and I'm going to excel in that as much as I can, to the point of to become the best in that field if I have the opportunity to. But at the same time, if Allah opens the door of marriage and every other things, obviously if your mom is alive, you serve your mum and you serve her well, and every role that Allah gives you, you try to do your best in it. And it really depends on what Allah gives, what Allah gives you, basically. So I just wanted to know, like, if I can choose what to focus on without putting a lot of like pressure on myself in one area. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we should promote balance, and I feel sometimes we don't see balance.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. I'll just make a little comment, and if anyone else wants to, they can as well. Jazakallah khair for your question. I think the thing is, Sister Badriya, we do have a biological clock that's ticking, right? So without wanting to put pressure on anyone, I'm just saying it's just a fact that we need to accept that as human beings, there is kind of a window of time, right, within which we probably need to try to get married and, establish a family. And those are natural things that we as human beings want. And if we don't want it now, we will want it probably later on, right? So I think the point is that, especially in the Muslim community, there's usually a window of time that you want to take advantage of, and you want to, actively try to get married, and it's an important and wonderful part of life. So not to neglect that, and not to kind of push opportunities to get married away. If you are, pursuing other interests, you have other studies and things like that.
Yes.
That shouldn't be a problem. It's just, I guess, unfortunately, in our times, the kind of balance is sometimes tipped in the wrong direction. And I know shuyukh who have sisters who come to them who reach their 40s and etc., who didn't get married, and then who are suffering, as a result of that, and they really feel it, and they really wish that they could have got married earlier and had children, and they feel like in a way they were kind of lied to, about this idea that they could have it all and they could get married whenever. And so I think we have to be realistic as well, and as the Prophet ﷺ said, if a man comes to you, or he said to the fathers, if a man comes to you whose character and deen satisfy you, then, and in other words, he comes to you to propose, then marry him to your daughter. So the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging us to take those opportunities, right? And see them as a blessing from Allah. Unfortunately, many sisters don't see marriage proposals as rizq, as a blessing from Allah that might not be there forever, So I think it's about having that balance. I myself got married when I was a teenager, and I'm studying and pursuing other things now, and my children are a lot older. So there are different ways of doing things, I think.
I would like to hear Brother Raja's perspective on that. He's been quiet for a while. I know it's quite late in Pakistan. Really appreciate your patience, Brother Raja. Do you want to make any comments?
Jazakallah khair. I think Sister Fatima has mentioned it really well. I'll just add a slightly different angle to it, which is that at the end of the day, we have to look at it from this perspective that we're here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so our ultimate success is success in dunya and akhirah. This is why we ask, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina azaban nar. So our ultimate objective is that we want success in dunya and akhirah. And if you want to be the best, because for myself, as per the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, love for your brother what you love for yourself. So if I want like A grade in akhirah, if I want an A++, or if I want an A star in the akhirah, I want to know what the best of people did. So when you look at it from the women's perspective, the leaders of the women of paradise have been mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He mentioned about Maryam and Asiya and Khadijah and Fatima. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with all of them. And all of these women were people who were married, or for example, they were raising a family, looking after their home, and this is what made them rise in rank. So there is nothing stopping a woman from working, as Sister Fatima very eloquently pointed out. There is nothing wrong with a woman wanting to work and having a career, but alhamdulillah, when we want to strive for the best, then there is great reward and great ajr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in raising a family, and this is something that gives you a win-win in both circumstances, meaning it gives you that peace of mind, having a family, having children, having people who are around you, who love you, who care for you, all of those things. And if you can at the same time balance your career as well, then all the more power to you. So inshallah, we should just make sure that in terms of our goals that we have, we don't neglect our akhirah goals in terms of achieving our dunyawi goals. So inshallah, if you have a balance of that, that's the win-win situation we can have.
Yes, and can I just add to what Brother Raja said, that remember, that was an excellent point, Brother Raja. When we're lying in our graves, dear brothers and sisters, all of us, whether you're a woman or a man, when we're lying in our graves, there are very few things that are going to continue to benefit us. We've been told there's only 3 things that will continue to benefit us. One is sadaqah jariyah that we gave, sadaqah that is ongoing. One is some knowledge that we left behind that continues to benefit people. But one of them, which is very, very powerful, is a righteous child making dua for you, right? So I don't think we can really underestimate the investment that a child and raising a family and, raising and being married and the maturation that takes place in all of that, as for you as a human being, but then also the reward and the benefit, as a believer. I don't think we can underestimate that.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful point, because righteous children they're not born, they're made. Yes, and this is from the parents. This is from the upbringing of the parents, and obviously the education they receive, which again falls on the parents. So it's quite important to make that assertion when we talk about topics like this. And also, this life is short. Your career will only go so far. Your life is short, and the akhirah is something which is eternal. So we should work more for the eternal, for the unending, rather than one which is quite limited in its duration. And kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, every soul will taste death, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're non-Muslim, practicing, non-practicing, regardless of that. So inshallah, we should all strive to not only be righteous ourselves, but also bring up our children to be righteous and to educate them correctly in the deen foremost. And then, of course, we have to educate them about the dunya as well, inshallah.
Brother, can I make one final point just on this? I know we have to move on. I want to say, because I'm noticing this is a big trend in the US, the pursuance of the career and delaying of marriage and all this. We have to be really careful that as we're doing that, we are not falling prey to the other temptations. So there's women and there's brothers who they will delay marriage till late 20s and 30s, but then now they're kind of talking to guys and girls on the side. So you're delaying marriage so you can pursue career, but then you're engaging in things that are very displeasing to Allah as you're pleasing Him to pursue something that will help the community. So we have to be really careful that as we're delaying marriage and we have these natural human desires, that we're not falling prey to these other things that are haram that could possibly make those great intentions that we originally had, that they can taint them and steal the reward and put us in a bad position in the akhirah. But thank you so much, Brother Raja. I wanted to say that as well. Jazakallah khair.
Sister Rabia.
Is it okay if I say one more thing or about the...
Okay, make it brief. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, yeah, Sister Badriya.
Oh, okay, cool. So basically, yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. We
Again, it's bad connection. Okay,
we
good.
can hear you. Go ahead. Yeah.
So just the topic of like marriage and how we shouldn't delay. Okay, so the topic of marriage and how we shouldn't delay marriage. Yeah. I would say that sometimes when you go to people to ask them about marriage, to speak about marriage to them, like for example, like the elders of the community, and they would ask you sometimes, okay, why do you want to get married? Like what? Like they act like you're asking them for something, like you want to commit a sin or something. And I like, meaning I'm saying I'm asking you to help me towards a sunnah, basically, which is something that's going to increase my faith. But I think we've made marriage something kind of like heavy and something like a huge responsibility, when it's actually meant to like in you, and it's a big responsibility, but it comes with big reward, because anything that is more like you struggle more for, you get more reward for it from Allah. So I feel like when you go to people and they say things like, okay, they start questioning your intentions, like, okay, like for what reason, I feel like that puts me off a bit sometimes. Like I'm just like, what, am I committing a crime for asking about marriage, wanting to speak about marriage? Like seriously, it's just, I want to expand my portfolio with Allah. Like I want to do more good deeds. I want to do, like, get involved in more, charity, marriage, everything, so that Allah is pleased with me. How do I know which deed Allah is going to accept from me? I don't know. So I have to do as much good as possible, right? So I'm going to go down marriage, that route, because that can weigh very heavily on the good deeds, on the scale, on that side of the scale, on the day of judgment. So I'm gonna go for it, inshallah. But it's just about people and their response to you when you speak about marriage, and they say, you know what, focus on yourself. And I'm like, okay, this is me focusing on myself. I want to pursue something for the sake of Allah. This is going to increase me, inshallah. So sorry, please, can you just refute those people, inshallah?
Yes, so I can elaborate on this point. You're right that sometimes the elders in the community might say, first finish the degree that you are doing, or make a career first, or you have to be a certain age, you're not mature enough. This kind of a thing can happen, but this is all cultural understanding, and this does not belong to our deen, as all of the speakers have elaborated. So you're right, we have this issue that we tend to say, okay, and especially to the boys too, we say that first complete this and this. For example, somebody's becoming a doctor, that takes him, for example, years. And until the guy is 32, 33, they tell him, do not get married. So this is wrong, this is not correct. What you are thinking is actually, you're on the right track, and as all the speakers have said. So yes, this is a very cultural thing. And this happens because, we think that our children have to be independent. And I don't understand what this term really means, being independent, that first you're independent, you're economically stable, and then you get married. And that's the wrong notion. That's the wrong understanding for that. And you're very right about that.
I just want to say, keep working on your elders.
Yeah.
Badriya. That's what you need to do. You need to keep working on them, because sometimes they think you're still young, they still see you as a baby, their little baby. So sometimes you have to show them that you're an adult now, and you're making these you're asking them from a mature perspective, and you're right, parents, if your children fall into haram because you stopped them from getting married and they were interested in getting married and they came to you, then the sin is on you. We need to be making it easier, of course, but sometimes it's just that they see you as their kids, so you have to kind of work on them, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, Sister Badriya, for the great question.
Okay.
Just very quickly, I was going to say, alhamdulillah, that's a great point. And one other point to sort of very quickly point out is that I've seen this trend in other communities, especially from the Indian subcontinent, non-Muslim communities, where they have taken this idea of education to the extreme. And there are many parents that I've spoken to, many friends of mine that I've spoken to, who have daughters at home now that are in their mid-30s, early 40s, who have multiple advanced degrees and unable to secure husbands. Yeah. So this is not an Islamic problem. This is not a Muslim problem. This is a where do you put your priorities problem. And we have other communities out there that have experienced this, that are now regretting heavily that they even encouraged their children to go down this route, because now they're having other issues. Just a quick point to make. Thank you.
Great. Jazakallah khair. Sister Rabia, last guest. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you
Please,
hear me?
where are you from? Any question, inshallah? Oh, you came on our show last time, didn't you? Was it from the Netherlands?
Yeah, I did actually. I'm from the Netherlands, yes.
I remember now.
Well, I see the sisters over here. Allahumma barik fikum. I'm so proud of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your lives. And the brothers also, of course. My issue is actually, it's about the hijab. I know it has to do with feminism, but it has more to do with my own self and the issue that I have. I used to actually wear the niqab and the hijab, and I don't anymore. Like I fell hard, and I have been struggling with getting up actually, and getting back to the point where I was really happy wearing my hijab and niqab and just, yeah. So I really want your advice, sisters, if you can. Maybe.
May Allah make it easy for you, sisters. Just to give a background, the sister has had some physical abuse and basically mistreatment in the country that she lives in. So I believe she's asking for your advice, what she should do in this situation. Let me know, Sister Rabia, if I've misrepresented anything.
No, that's right.
You mean that she's had physical abuse due to hijab?
Yeah, I was actually at the
Not
time.
from a family,
yeah.
but from people.
No, not from family. My family doesn't have an issue with it, but they don't really like me wearing niqab. They rather have me just wearing the traditional, like actually cultural hijab, because I don't. Yeah, it's not really the correct hijab, and this is where I started struggling actually, and I had a lot of abuse from non-Muslims outside of my home, and I used to wear niqab actually before I got married. And at the time when I got married, yeah, my husband was at work, so I had to do a lot of things by myself outside, and yeah, so I had a lot of problems then.
Can I ask the sister a question, sister? Assalamu alaikum. Sister, I'd love to know. You said there were some abuses in the situation, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you and protect you from any mistreatment. I wanted to ask you, what do you feel actually deep down? Even though that happened, right? Everything is connected to an emotion, like the sister said, or everything is connected to an experience. If you could pinpoint the reason you took it off.
Yeah, I really love my niqab, of course, and I still do, yeah. But the problem was actually when I took off my niqab, and then I started to wear like only the abaya with like a scarf, and then I started feeling like I wasn't wearing the correct hijab. So that made it easier, like to just take it off, because then I felt like, yeah, I don't know.
You mean like you felt like a hypocrite because you weren't doing the full thing, so maybe this is not acceptable, so what's the point type of a thing?
Well, not a hypocrite, but yeah. I didn't feel like a hypocrite, and I still don't, alhamdulillah, because...
Yeah, no, I want to be clear too. I wasn't saying that you were, I would just...
No, I know.
I want to be clear on
understand.
your live. Some people tell me this. Some sisters say, well, I can't wear hijab because I'm broken. So until I'm fixed, until I'm a better Muslim, I can't put it on. And the thing is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like perfection is not a requirement for hijab. Yeah. Some people think, they have to get to a certain level, and then I hear that argument. So I wasn't sure, and that's what I was asking. I was just trying to connect the idea of why you took it off and what keeps it off for you.
No, well, at work, at a job I had, so I started working after I got divorced. So after I got divorced, I had to go out and work. And actually, that's when the problem started, because at work I couldn't wear my niqab. Then I took off my niqab. And then after that, they started to complain about my jilbab. So then I had, like, you know, it was just small steps, but in the end, I just ended up taking it off. So it was,
if you don't mind,
it was also because I was like weak in my iman, and that's also because of all the problems that came at me like at once. So,
sister, which country are you in? Just
I live in the Netherlands. Yeah, last time I said they banned the niqab, but they didn't actually. They partly, so you can't go into public places with niqab.
Well, sister, you know, I can really.
Yeah, and sorry. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, it seems like you've been through a lot, you know, in a short amount of time. Divorce and having to go out to work, and probably discrimination and.
Yeah, and actually, at the time I got the divorce, that's when my daughter was born, also. So.
Subhanallah. So you've had a lot on your plate. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, help you in all of that.
Yeah.
The thing is that you don't want. First of all, who said to you that taking off the niqab means that you're not wearing correct hijab anymore? You know.
No, that's not what I said. It was like from all those small steps, and then in the end, when I started to wear just a scarf with pants and everything, and then I started to think like, this is not what it's supposed to be. So then I took off the scarf, and then I started to, like, when I was feeling a bit better about myself and everything, and the situation calmed down a bit, then I started to work on like the way I dress, and I still do, but I still don't wear the hijab. So.
And do you pray, sister?
Yeah, I actually, this is something that I did hold on to, because this is the part of my deen that was easy, because it was private. It's like, yeah.
So please make sure that you keep hold of your salah, you know, because the salah is the key to everything else. You know, once a person starts losing the salah, then they become in great peril. So it's very good that you're holding on to the salah. You know, please keep that up. And please be aware that shaitan, he's always, you know, working on us, right? He's always working on us. So he will make you feel like, well, I'm not perfect, I'm not doing things right, so let me just be all or nothing. And as Muslims, we don't need to be all or nothing, okay? Do your best. Do the best that you can in your situation, but don't do all or nothing, because then, I'm sure that all your experiences, from all your experiences, you must have felt that the one person or the one being that you do have in your life is Allah.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose your connection to Allah, because then that's the real loss, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
All of these things, they happen to people.
But
the real loss will be that connection with Allah. So I would really encourage you to not allow shaitan to give you these thoughts, you know, that I'm not good enough, this hijab isn't good enough. Some hijab is better than no hijab. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. But the issue is not only this, but what I felt also, what like also influenced me a lot, is the fact that when I started to have these issues and started to, like, you know, go out of balance, like, I felt like the sisters that I had around me, you know, because you live in a very different world when you're like, when you're practicing, and it's like you have all these sisters around you, and they are so, you know, they're supporting you and everything. But when I actually needed them, there was no one there. So this was also a big...
Maybe sister, you would like to take the contact of one of the Ustadhahs, maybe keep in touch with them, and maybe, you know, sometimes when you speak heart to heart in private instead of being on a stream, it's easier that way, you know, because the shaitan is always there, like Ustadhah Fatima said.
I don't mind, because there's maybe other sisters Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, but maybe there's other sisters here listening, or that go through the same things, and maybe they don't want to speak out or anything like that. But I'm not ashamed of my situation. I just want some advice so I can better myself, inshallah.
So, sister, if I can say something, it's very natural that when people go through hardship, especially divorce, our ulama have said about divorce that it is kind of hurts like, someone has passed away. So this is real. The pain is real. And this is my experience with many women that I come across, that when difficulties like this, especially coming from other people, a spouse, the people around you, your friends, your family comes in, the spirituality gets affected and the spirituality goes down. So what you're feeling is not abnormal. It's not something that other people have not felt. So don't blame yourself too much about it. It's okay to
No, I don't, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, and people do feel like that. Their spirituality does get affected, but that's a stage. After you pass through that stage, Sister Fatima is saying, and Sister Mindful Muslimah is saying that keep your struggles up. You will enter into a stage that you will accept, and you will think this, yes, but for that you need a group of people who support you. So a good thing will be to maybe find a group that can help you. The story of the people of the Kahf, right? What was when their iman was being tested? What did Allah Subhanahu wa Taala teach them? Find a group that supports your iman. So maybe you can hang around with people and find people, maybe online, maybe in that manner. If there are groups in that manner who will support you in that. And things like that. So then inshallah, but for the hijab, I might say that Islam gives us the guideline. Islam does not tell us that everyone has to wear a jilbab. Jilbab is one way. So what you
I don't mean. I'm sorry if I maybe misspoke, but I don't mean like only wearing jilbab is the right hijab. But there's a lot of different ways to wear hijab.
Yes.
So I just actually stepped away from all of these things, and I started to wear really this was not the correct hijab. So
no, sister, it's okay. See, you went through such a hard time, and you felt low. You felt spiritually low. It happens. It happens to all of us, and don't feel bad about that. It's okay.
Yeah.
So,
and the strange thing is. Yeah, the strange thing is how much I love my hijab, and I want to wear it, but I can't bring up.
No. Inshallah, you will find the time, and the strength will come that you will start wearing it again. Inshallah, you coming here and expressing this concern in front of so many people speaks of the courage that you have, the courage that you have to accept and to do this. And inshallah, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala will bless you with the courage to do that. So don't feel bad about it. Don't feel bad. Just do your best, and try to do. Maybe when these things happen, small steps at a time. Take small steps at a time. Maybe add one thing, then another thing, then another thing, right? And I would say in this situation, most importantly, and I think this is one of the things maybe from this platform we can say is that, and I'm a big proponent of that, we need to have some kind of support groups for our women too. As Sister Mindful Muslimah is saying, Sister Fatima is saying, we need to listen. But we need some kind of platforms where we can come together and do this kind of a thing.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm very actively involved with the Unitarian Church because of the university. We have exchanges with them. And one thing that I noticed over there is so many people join those places because of the support groups that they have.
Yeah, subhanAllah, this is also a very big issue when we don't have support around us. That's what I was talking about earlier, because that's when you need the sisters the most. And then I felt like they all had they were all busy, no one called anymore, no one asked how you're doing, are you still breathing?
That's the thing. And maybe Sister Mindful Muslimah was saying in the beginning, this is why she came online, because she saw this kind of a need, that women need this kind of a support where they need somebody to listen to them and, and acknowledge that. So first of all, don't feel bad. Don't feel bad about that. But yes, you're right that, the courage is there, and we will get to that point. But temporarily, when hardship comes, our spirituality does go down. So, but inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you, and I kind of, I respect you for the courage you have for this. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, but don't feel bad. Try your best. Try your best.
Sister, can I say one last thing? I just want to suggest her very specific. I know she asks for advice. When I'm having a very, very hard time, what has always helped me and has never failed me for anything like this is the sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He says, the slave is closest to his Lord in sujood. So what I would do is in the last third of the night, continuously, I would put my face into sujood and I would call out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at this deep, deep feeling that I have. Everything you expressed to us, sister, I'm sure you can say that and more. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He always answers the caller at the moment that he calls. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make ease for you, inshallah.
Thank you so much for your advice.
Sister Rabia, I just want to say,
I really love you for the sake of Allah.
Sister Rabia, just as a last kind of advice to you, I just want to say that of course, we love you for the sake of Allah, and we support you, in your struggles. I just want to point out to you that, really please reflect on this, that sometimes when the Muslim community disappoint us, we disobey Allah. A person can disobey Allah in order to seek revenge on the Muslim community. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying, it's something for us to really think about, because sometimes you hear this. Somebody says, I had a bad experience, so I stopped praying. I had these Muslims didn't treat me well, and so I stopped doing this. You see, there's no connection between those two things.
No, but of course we don't have
tawakkul on the Muslim community. Of course, the Muslim community should be supporting you.
Yeah, exactly. It's the other way around. When you're going through these things and you need someone to tell you, wake up, what are you doing, and you don't have that. That's more the issue than that I really was disappointed in them. I mean, of course they have their own lives, but it's you feel like you need that support, and it's not there anymore because you've made mistakes, because it's like you're not.
My dear sister, what can cause a spiral? This is something that the ulama talk about, that can lead a person into a spiral of more negativity and more kind of distance away from Allah, is that you stop doing some of the other commands of Allah. Yeah, so you want to do the opposite. That your nafs and the shaitan is encouraging you to kind of stop doing certain things. No, you want to double down and do those things, because that's how your iman will increase. Yeah, by increasing the good deeds, obeying Allah. And that's what sabr is, isn't it? Sabr is continuing to obey Allah despite what's going on, and continuing to stay away from sin despite what's going on. So although we do sympathize with you, I would like to show you a bit of tough love and say to you that my dear sister, you don't want to be a person who loses the dunya and the akhirah, right? You want to be somebody who, regardless of the trials of this life, you stayed connected to Allah, you stayed obedient to Allah to the best of your ability. That's all, to the best of your ability in your situation. So to the best of your ability when it comes to the hijab, when it comes to the obligations, because hijab is an obligation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us guidelines about how, it's not just guidelines, it's commands. He's commanded us how we must be in public, right? Everything except the face and the hands to be covered with something loose, opaque, not something that is a dazzling display in and of itself. If it fulfills those things, then be happy and do your best to do that, because the one best friend that you have is Allah. And so in trying to appease other people, if you break that bond, then what do you have? What do you have left,
I'm trying to make it stronger, because of course I know
just
that
giving you a
I
bit
fell,
of
so I know.
I hope you don't get offended.
Barakallahu feek, jazakallahu khairan for your advice. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much. And inshallah, I can get in contact with someone.
Yeah. If you connect us with dawahwise@gmail.com, and we'll get you all these contact details for the sisters or support group,
Okay,
inshallah.
Jazakallah
Okay,
khairan, inshallah.
thank you for coming along in this free case.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Inshallah. We really need to come to a close now. I mean, I do really appreciate that you've been sitting there for more than 3.5 hours away from your family and so on. So, Jazakumullah khairan. If we just go along to just say a few concluding words on the stream, on the subject, inshallah, and not to prolong any further. Shall we start with brother in Pakistan who's getting very late? Just very briefly, what would you like to share as a concluding remark, inshallah, on this topic?
Jazakumullah khairan, bro. I would say that I think it's more about understanding our responsibilities than about demanding our rights. Men and women both need to understand that they have responsibilities on them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as long as we do our part, because we understand that not everybody in the world is going to give us our rights, so what we should look at is that, am I fulfilling my responsibilities on others around me? So I think if you look at it from that perspective, inshallah, this whole issue of men right, women rights is going to be resolved, inshallah.
Barakallah fi, Jazakallah khairan. Ustadhah Aminah.
Yes, no, Jazakallah khairan Katira for inviting me here today and giving the opportunity to be here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for doing all of this. And my concluding remark would be that, have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the center of our lives, and that will solve everything else for us. Of course, challenges are there. Of course, human beings make mistakes and all of these things go on. But inshallah, we have to keep trying, and we have to keep trying not for ourselves, but for other people as well. So inshallah, and then, the rights are always earned, never demanded. So, and they're earned by pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to do that, inshallah.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair.
Shaykh Fatima.
You got 1 minute.
Jazakallah khair. I think I just want to say that alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with Islam, and He gave us in it the way to look at the world with such wisdom. If only we were to reflect and we were to really look into, the wisdoms, we would see them. Unfortunately, the narrative is often hijacked, it's taken over, and so we can't see the beauty. But I think in essence, what we can say is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is neither male nor female. Okay, and He is our highest authority. So as Muslim women, we submit to Allah, and He sets the standard, and we don't make men our standard. And I hope everyone can go with that message, and I encourage everybody to seek knowledge, study the seerah, study Islam properly, because I think one of the biggest problems in our community is ignorance of our own deen. So jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sister Mindful Muslimah.
I wanted to say jazakumullahu khairan for creating this platform, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward each and every person that was here, taking every moment of their time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala count it on your scale times 10. I wanted to say maybe first to any sisters who's having doubt in their faith and feminism and those ideologies creeping in, instead of asking why, because I deal with this with women a lot, instead of asking why can I not do this and why can I not do that, instead ask, why are you asking why? Why are you asking why? What have you been made to feel as if there's something wrong with the way that our deen is? Because oftentimes these feelings come from another place of influence. And lastly, for each and every one of us, I remind myself, as I remind everyone else, to try as best we can to give everyone their haqq. We are all shepherds of sheep. We each have a place. If myself as a mother, I make sure my children get their rights. As a father, if he makes sure that his wife gets and the kids gets, we all do these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make sure that the home is a place of barakah and a place where our daughters, our boys, all of them, they're brought up in a way that is very healthy and very true and aligned with Islam. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us to do this. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen.
Ustadh Hashim, your final remarks.
I think everyone said a lot. It's quite late, so I'll keep it brief. Ramadan is just around the corner now, so inshallah, may Allah balagna Ramadan. We do the best during Ramadan, make it easy for everyone, and may Allah accept from us our ibadah, our fasting, our du'as, and our zakat, and whatever good works that we intend to do, inshallah. So Jazakallah khair once again to the brother Raja, Sister Aminah, Ustadhah Aminah, Sheikha Fatima, and Sister Mindful Muslimah for your help in making this topic more interesting than what it would be just with the two of us here. So thank you very much, and we learned a lot from you. And inshallah, in future, we hope that you will come back to our panel and maybe discuss some other topics which are related to women in Islam and maybe non-Muslims as well. So Jazakallah khair, inshallah, keep us in the du'as.
Okay. Jazakumullahu khairan. Without any making any longer, I really appreciate you present. It's been a privilege and an honor listening to all of you and learning from you. So we just hope that our Muslim brothers and sisters have benefited and will benefit. So please share this stream and share it with your friends, your families, because we have an excellent discussion here from our esteemed panel members. So until next time, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta.